Charles,
Great to be here.
Epstein dead.
In theory.
In theory, right. We don't really know.
Exactly. At this stage, we know very little other than that this poster is up there among the greats of all time.
Thank you.
That picture of Epstein in particular is magnificent. I mean, it really...
It fits well. I must admit, obviously I'm aware of the paper chase, but I don't think I've ever... It was a movie or a TV show or both?
It was definitely a movie. I don't know if it was also a TV show, but it was a movie basically about Harvard Law School, about trying to get through Harvard Law School. It was not... What's that one... There's another one about Harvard Law School that's very sort of frivolous, but this is, you know, the anguish of trying to get your way through the law school when it was actually a serious law school, unlike what it may have become in recent years.
It's a serious joke in recent years.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a good funnel for cash to the wealthy. So, all right, well, but obviously I think we're very concerned in today's broadcast that there was this huge document release of information related to Jeffrey Epstein and his associates, and then, whoops, he's dead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just shocking. Before we get into that, which is the subject really of the bulk of the presentation, I also want to say that the picture of the other heads, particularly Bill Clinton, and I wonder if he actually has an outfit like that, because it would be pretty funny if he did. It's like a full clown.
Well, you know, he's got his Kumbaya bracelet that he was wearing both times that I saw him, but this is a very collegiate outfit, and this is the facial expression from when Donald Trump had that, I guess it was a debate or a press conference where he brought all the rape victims. Bill had that uncomfortable look on his face.
But so who are the other, for those who may not be familiar, who are the other people seated at the Clinton table?
Well, of course, the former U.S. attorney for the Palm Beach area there in Florida, I guess it's the Southern District of Florida, Alexander Acosta, looking rather shocked. And some of the people who may have been presiding over or somehow involved with or otherwise should have been involved with the investigation, Robert Mueller, James Comey, and now Christopher Wray.
And what, Rod Rosenstein's hiding under the table?
Yeah, you know what? Rod Rosenstein I did not put there. He obviously is very involved. It's often a matter of getting the right angle and facial expression. I just had limited photography on Rod Rosenstein, and frankly, we could fill this table up with unscrupulous shenanigan. I don't know what you'd call someone who's involved with shenanigans, but...
Crook.
Shenanigonian.
Right. But really, so here we have a situation with Epstein, and he has to be, or had to be if he's now passed away, one of the most notorious criminals, accused criminals on the face of the earth. And, you know, there are many fine people in the FBI and the prison system and justice system, et cetera. But you would think that somebody high up the food chain, like say William Barr and Christopher Wray, would have said, listen, you know, we got this guy. You know, it's a miracle to me actually that Epstein came back from Europe, you know, without thinking through the idea that he might be apprehended at Teterboro Airport, because you're giving notice to the authorities that you're on your way, and you know, you're kind of stuck when you land. I mean, you can't just immediately take off. So wondering whether that his return to the United States wasn't part of more of a negotiation or a process that may have been going on. So, but when you get the guy into the system, what we know officially is that he had allegedly attempted to commit suicide several weeks ago, you know, and you would think that if we had integrity in the justice system and an honest FBI, they would make sure that their job number one was to keep this guy alive.
If only we had those things, Charles.
Right. And you would think that it would be possible to do that.
Yeah.
And you would also think, and we're getting into it now with people who know how this works, that there actually are rules and regulations and all sorts of checks and balances. And people will be able to tell us. They may have to tell us under oath in congressional hearings and other ways, how far the treatment of Epstein deviated from the law, but going all the way back to, why did his trial, his prosecution, and for which he ultimately pled guilty to a lesser sentence, why did that take so long? What were his contacts in the Palm Beach and Florida various government offices? What contacts did he have? Who might he have been paying off? Who had he slipped inside each of those offices? And then why did he serve such a short prison sentence under such lax conditions?
Yeah.
And then why was he able to get back into respectability, hanging around with powerful people at his various mansions? How did all that happen? And why are we even accepting Barr's pronouncement that he's livid? I don't want livid. I want the person in charge of the whatever that section of that Manhattan Correctional thing in somebody's office Monday morning, if not sooner,
explaining what's up,
and then fired with extreme prejudice.
I think it's important that we correct a few things, because there's been a lot of people saying that he was on suicide watch. It seems that the official story is that the suicide watch was lifted. However, that shouldn't really matter, because that thing is also, it's actually called not the Manhattan Correction Center, it's the Municipal Correction Center in Manhattan, but it's a federal facility for federal prisoners who are, too dangerous to be released on their own recognizance or on bail or whatever before their trial. So even if he's not on suicide watch, it's my understanding that the way those cells are designed, there's not like, things you can loop ropes through. And I mean, they know anybody in there is facing super serious charges and is likely to try to kill themselves or be a target for being killed. So it is particularly troubling that this sort of thing would happen. And it also shows that the federal marshals or whoever is looking at him are totally unable to keep someone in custody.
Right. Well, we're going to get into this in some considerable depth, but again, hats off to the art department for another great poster, and somehow it'll get to the next screensaver, or however you choose to.
Glad you brought that up, Charles, because people who become sponsors of the show not only help keep the program going, but when they come in at $10 per month or higher, either on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, they're still going to get the free Sunday with Charles screensaver, as well as access to loads of great exclusive content. So that's a good way for people to keep the show going.
Good. Well, why don't we jump into the 9 slides that we have for today, and
there you go.
So where I think we are in this, we've been pushing on this whole collection of frauds for some time, actually, specifically since June with you, since June of 2017. And I was frankly shocked Saturday morning when I got the news that supposedly Epstein was dead.
Yeah.
I mean, and perhaps very few people deserve to die that way, but I think he might well have been one of them.
It would be good if to keep him alive to the trial, though.
Right, if he is in fact dead. But what I realized immediately is that this story would catapult now, not only the Epstein story, but the Clinton story, and anything connected to the Me Too movement, and the possible corruption in the art world, the corruption in the charity, all this stuff is going to come together, I think, messily and oddly neatly at the same moment, because all of these mainstream news people, in Hollywood, the reaction to Weinstein is, got to believe the accusers, right? This one, how could Trump tweet out a conspiracy theory that the Clintons possibly had something to do with Epstein? I mean, it's just, the double standard here is so jarring.
The president doesn't have the right to be believed, Charles.
Right, exactly.
It's terrible.
So it should jolt us, I think. It may take a while for the lamestream media to catch up, if they ever can catch up. So many concrete blocks strapped to the back of their cars, their clown cars, dragging them back. But it should jar us into saying, now wait a minute, why are we so willing to rush in and say that Epstein is dead when the official, by suicide, the official word is, you're not going to see a body?
Yeah.
You know,
The PIO told me that personally.
you know, why are we willing to do that? You know, we just take it on faith. You know, Epstein committed suicide because I told you, and I'm not going to give you any evidence. That is not what journalism is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be, there are facts. We may not like the facts. We may look at life in a left-leaning or a right-leaning perspective or agnostic perspective. But when we confront objective facts, you know, we have to look at those facts, consider them, and decide if we want to draw meaningful implications from the facts and the trends and the patterns and everything else. And so actually what I think could well happen here, there are so many damning facts in the public domain about the Clintons, about Epstein, about Weinstein, about the art world, about the way in which politicians monetize their service, the ways in which the billionaire and soon-to-be trillionaire class gets ever more wealthy, propping up these figurine presidents and prime ministers who are a little more than puppets. And now we learn that there may be actually diabolical ties to some of these people and sex trafficking. And so now we've got another unexplained death, purported suicide, sex, money, drugs, rock and roll, everything. This has got to be a story that either World War III takes us away from looking at it, or it gets resolved. I mean, this is going to be from the time I first saw it at around 7:40, I think, or 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. It's led every news, every hour on the weekend when people aren't really working too hard. And now the president's on vacation for a week. So I would guess a lot of the mainstream media stars are also going to be on vacation for a week. Nonetheless, I think this I hope will guarantee is too strong, but will make it highly likely that the mainstream media now has to really understand how diabolically criminal the Clinton Foundation conspiracy has been, and how that conspiracy to launder money, trade money for influence and influence for money, how that piece of the scandal is central to an understanding of why Mueller and Comey and Rosenstein were determined to stop Trumpy, as we have explained in multiple previous broadcasts. I mean, you can't look at the Russian hoax and pick it up, the witch hunt, pick it up in 2015 and say, that's when it all began. That's not when it began. It began long ago. Certainly by 1997 is an important period to start. You may even want to go further back. So as we think about this, the reason we're using the title of the paper chase, in actual fact, if we did not have Al Gore's internets invented at Harvard, if we didn't have them pesky things, it is possible that this conspiracy could have just burned all the paper relating to what has happened since October 23, 1997. But newsflash, there are internets. And
it's a series of tubes, I understand.
That's what I hear, yeah. There used to be these two cans connected by a piece of string. But the fact is that there is a mountain ranges of electronic evidence all over the world. And we've been through some portions of some of them in certain countries where the governments or arms of the government have claimed that they gave donations to the Clinton Foundation, which magically never showed up in the Clinton Foundation. You have this kind of evidence of Norway writes a bunch of checks totaling $250 million. There should be a record somewhere of the money came out of the Norwegian treasury, and where did it go? And similarly, in Unite, the UK, many other places around the world, there are such records. And all of the private foundations, the Gates Foundation, Rockefeller, you name it, Johnson Foundation, all of these big foundations have to not only keep records, but make them publicly available. So anybody can do all this cross-checking. So we're in a zone now where you can't look and say, well, there's the Me Too scandal, that's just Hollywood. The Clinton Foundation scandal, that's just Bill Clinton in Arkansas. The Epstein scandal, well, that's just New York. I mean, you can't at this stage dismiss everything and say, well, everybody knows the world is corrupt. Let's forget about this.
A lot of people say that, though.
Yeah, bullshit. Portions of all countries are corrupt, but this country is distinctive, or was distinctive, until the point that we allowed ourselves to accept this kind of rot. And I think, you can say what you want about Donald Trump, and Bernie Sanders for that matter in 2016. The reason there was such support for Trump and for Sanders, and that some Sanders supporters likely voted for Trump. Exactly. All right, there you go. You and legions of others likely turned around and voted for Trump. Is people across the political spectrum want to see a level playing field, whether you're economically disadvantaged minority hoping to chase and win the American dream, or a rich person who's accustomed to having things done properly. You want to have, when you think about it, you want a level playing field. You don't want this set of precedents to stand as these corrupt insiders embrace the idea of unregulated globalism after starting by 1988 and arguably before, so that they could rig the global system. You don't want that. And you certainly don't want intelligence agencies becoming aware of what I believe was a blackmail plot, and either officially, running Epstein or benefiting off Epstein, or unofficially, profiting from whatever he was doing, knowing full well that what Epstein was doing and Maxwell and others was a diabolically criminal set of acts, harvesting the lives and souls of children, and tempting these vain and easily corrupted, ruthless narcissists who get into our political system, tempting them by giving them a chance to basically exploit a 14-year-old girl or boy or whatever it was. I mean, that is just so far away from being what people in government should be doing, and so far away from what people,
anybody,
right, but especially people who think, as Hillary Clinton thought, that she ought to be able to decide, from looking through her gigantic Chardonnay wine bottle glasses, which country to nuke next. I mean, you can't create a system where the President of the United States has such power and then, actually come close to giving that power to a Hillary Clinton,
right, and
think that everything's fine.
Well, those Chardonnay glasses are Fresnel, because she gets dizzy otherwise, apparently, Charles.
But so then when we think about the Clintons, they have this long pattern of practice, both of them, of cheating at everything and getting away with it. So what kind of, what are the moral hazard? I mean, what kind of moral hazard precedent are we setting here by dignifying, the Clintons and their cronies as being, an equal side of a debate about what we should do going forward? I mean, they got the benefit of the doubt about Arkansas, Whitewater, the way they went into the White House the first term.
Ron Brown. Vince Foster.
Travelgate. We could go, we could do 40 hours of shows about that, which we're I hope not going to have to do. But, these people, when they got elected, they decided in the 92 election that it would be, that their strategy would be to have a war room. And you can read the stories about this. They would identify who their opponents were. They literally had an enemies list. You go on their enemies list, and the message is, look, I'm going to be the President of the United States, and you want to be my enemy, that's not a good move once I become President of the United States. And after that, when Hillary's President of the United States, you don't want to be on our wrong side. The threat part of it, and then the blackmail part of it is, we know the story about the FBI files. We don't know the whole story yet. We know that while Bill Clinton was president, a large number of FBI files, and we know the actual names, the supposed names of all the people who had files on them, somehow made their way into the Clinton political machinery, which is strictly forbidden.
Wait, so the FBI is researching these so-called enemies? And
No. Well, we don't know the whole story, but the basic issue is that the FBI can open an investigation, and when it opens an investigation, there is a lot of information in the files, and it's unproven allegations, it's suspicions, it's working theories, it's maybe facts, it may be witness statements and all those kind of stuff. And that stuff is not supposed to go outside the FBI. That is supposed to stay inside the FBI, and particularly if it's a grand jury thing that doesn't result in a conviction, that stuff is supposed to be kept confidential. Why? If you don't do that, then no one would talk to the FBI. Right? When you're trying to solve a crime, if you knew that your supposition might end up in the public domain, you're not going to be frank with the FBI,
right,
or anybody else. And so, for the Clintons, and again, both of them were lawyers, two for the price of one, Rhodes Scholar, brilliant guy, supposedly Hillary's even smarter. these are people who don't have the defense of saying, I don't understand the law.
They don't even know what "is" means, so I don't understand where they get that. I have a serious question, though, Charles. How do we know about this war room enemies list? Was that in a book or something? Has that been admitted to?
Multiple books and movies, yeah.
Wow.
But it's standard, actually, in politics.
Really?
Yeah, standard.
Well, because when you think about people like Christopher Ruddy, who wrote that book, The Strange Death of Vince Foster, he seemed to be what the Clintons would consider a staunch opponent of them bringing out that information. But then later in his career, the Clintons funded to some extent Newsmax, and he's seen in photographs with Bill smiling.
Right.
I couldn't imagine a photograph like that with you in it.
That you won't see that photograph.
Yeah.
But
so what's the story there?
I think in the case of, I don't really want to...
Not him personally,
Yeah.
I'm just saying these people who appear to be enemies but then later are
the Clinton
Kenneth Starr, et cetera.
The Clintons are very smart at figuring out leverage points against people who want to do things in politics or in business or in certain places where they have power. And as a guess, they found such a place, leverage points against Christopher Ruddy. His early work I think was pretty good. The Newsmax stuff, some of it is good, some of it not so good. But I can reveal, I won't say on which show, but in the 2016 cycle, there were only two people two people spiked me, interviewed me.
Jake Tapper.
Jake Tapper, was one of them, CNN. And that occurred, the interview was around June 2nd, 2016. So we go back into this timeline. June 2nd, 2016 was the oh shit moment, I think, when the Clinton team, when the Clinton team realized, this Trump guy, he might just win here. We better rev up this Crossfire Hurricane stuff, and there I go in, I spend almost an hour on camera explaining the problems I had with the Clinton Foundation, we all should have with the Clinton Foundation. I'm told it's going to be part of a documentary that's going to appear in the September-October time frame on CNN. Nothing happens, of course. I'm sure the tape went directly to the Clinton campaign. Here's what this guy thinks, and we talked about that before. Clintons, of course, the Clinton Foundation having lied to the producer of CNN or the young producer, when she contacted them with a bunch of my questions, this producer swore to me, not on a Bible or anything, but was very emphatic in her view that the Clinton Foundation said that they're surprised that I would be even wasting my time with CNN, because the CNN would be wasting their time with me because I had all these questions answered to my satisfaction by the Clinton Foundation, which never happened.
Yeah.
That just didn't happen. The other, of course, was Newsmax. I was literally on my way to an interview later in that period, before the election, that I was all set up. I'm not going to say with whom, but somebody at Newsmax, and I just got the message, the interview's canceled. I'm like, why? I can't tell you.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's.
I can't tell you is a stupid answer. They should have just said,
Right.
Scheduling issues.
Yeah, it was obvious.
Yeah.
I accepted the interview. By that time, there were many stories that Christopher Ruddy had given a bunch of money to the Clinton Foundation. And I was like, I'll happily explain to you how to get your money back, which maybe you should care about because this thing's going down, but...
that book he wrote presented the most compelling body of evidence with regard to the death of Vince Foster. It seems unequivocal that he was killed and placed there.
Right. That's exactly. So the good news, though, I think, looking ahead through the tea leaves here, and nobody can actually predict the future, and if I could, I wouldn't be working. Well, I guess I'm not working.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, you look here, we're in a quiet period as families who have kids still in school get their kids ready through the doctor's appointments and dentist appointments and everything you have to do to get a kid back into school. New
Mandatory
clothes,
vaccinations,
all
in
that
some
stuff.
states.
Yeah, all that stuff that you got to do. And this is a good moment, as Trump is taking this week off. This is a good week to take off, frankly, because you can relax, and then you've got another 2 or 3 weeks after that. You got Labor Day, and then bang, zoom, your kids are in school. So I don't look for a lot of government action in the short term, but by Labor Day, shortly after Labor Day, I think in the United States there's going to be all kinds of activity. In England, we have Brexit. Is it or is it not going to happen by October 31st?
Is that the deadline?
That is the hard deadline, October 31st. And
Unless they decide to change it again?
I don't think that will happen. I think it's going to be a hard Brexit. But anyway, there's going to be a lot of tumult around the world, not the least of which is already caused by fighting with China, and now North Korea getting more aggressive, and Middle East blowing up, and Hong Kong. I mean, on and on and on. There's so many flashpoints. But it's the summer, so people are going to try, I hope, to chill out a little bit. Markets are getting ever more, volatile and tough to predict, and companies are beginning to take down their growth expectations. So this is not a period of calm and tranquility. This is the storm before the megastorm. And in this environment, we don't actually have a credible challenger to Donald Trump. He will be the Republican nominee. No one's going to raise enough money to take him on in any primary, and that's just a waste of time. Democrats, I mean, I'll be the opposite of the way they would behave towards me. I'll be charitable and say, I don't need to say anything. Just let them speak for themselves.
Right.
I mean, how many of these people will poll at 1%? I think a whole bunch of them are going to have trouble getting there.
I think that they can each have a job at Ocasio-Cortez's old coffee restaurant when the election's over. You're right.
If that. So with that, why don't we go for your new viewers and just to remind everybody that the approach here is not intended to be the same. In fact, it's intended to be distinctly different from the mainstream media. These, when you and I got into this back in June of 2017, we realized this was a big scandal.
Yeah.
We realized that people's attention spans are not that long. We realized that if we were to lay this whole thing out in the beginning, people would say that is so big and so complicated that obviously it's wrong. Because that's the defense. The same thing happened to me on GE. GE is much bigger than the Clinton Foundation. And much more complicated, especially when you consider that GE is constantly reshuffling itself, buying companies, selling companies. So how do you put together a 5-year historical trend for what General Electric would look like when it's constantly changing? It's very tough to do that. It's very tough to understand it. And similarly with GE, I just made it very simple in the beginning and then got people to think about it. And the more you think about it, then eventually people say, well, obviously it's a fraud. Yeah, if it was so obvious, how come you didn't come up with this?
There's a lot of people who like to rely on that, Occam's razor,
Right.
which, it makes sense. But by that logic, all you need to do is plan a particularly elaborate crime, and then it couldn't possibly be that because it's complicated.
Which is, I think,
the simplest thing.
That's exactly the Clintons. See,
Yeah.
the first mistake that people make when they if they choose to think about fraudsters, is they assume that fraudsters are stupid. And it's the exact opposite. Fraudsters are among the smartest people on the planet. They just have absolutely no morals, no sense of right or wrong. They're very smart people.
All of them?
Many of them, yeah. Well, actually, the most successful ones are incredibly smart because they haven't been caught yet. And this idea that it's the elephant in the room, the idea, you see a jarring thing, and your mind refuses to accept there's an elephant in your living room.
Yeah.
And the guys just took a gigantic 18-pound dump in the corner over there, Jason. So you got to do something about it. But
I don't even have a living room
anymore because the elephant's taken over.
Yeah.
But so the approach we take here is to lay out. We try to marry your background with my background, addressing corporate boards and senior executives and giving speeches and stuff. What we try to do is give you, the audience, the ability to look at the evidence for yourselves. And we encourage you to do that because, when you do that, this becomes part of a movement as opposed to just me on a soapbox or Jason on a soapbox. When you look through the evidence, which is out there, we link it, most of it to, on these slide presentations. We're now trying to keep each slide presentation short to no more than 9 to 12 pages. Thanks to Jason. That's
right. No, I have nothing to do with that.
No, you suggested they be shorter.
Oh.
If you do want to contact us with ideas, constructive ideas and suggestions, and I get many of them and I appreciate them, you can contact me via my website or follow me on Twitter and send me a direct message. Do the same with Jason. Jason has put all of these shows on one playlist, and I guess we're now up to what, 171 today or 170?
Yeah, today is
171.
the 171st show, Charles. Congratulations.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had alcohol that's 171 proof.
I don't know, does it even go up that high?
200 would be 100% alcohol.
But hopefully we're not going to be involved in that today. People who haven't seen all these shows, Charles, can just go to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, and we've got this Sunday with Charles playlist that includes every episode we've done, not only on Sunday with Charles, but also with the show that is on temporary hiatus while you're writing your book. Charles Ortel is closing in, so people can go back and review all that stuff. And as I've said many times, I think you could really pull any one of these and find sufficient evidence to basically prove crimes that would put any of these perpetrators behind bars for a long, long time. I mean, along the lines of do not try this at home. I also want to let people know, Charles, we had a great episode yesterday, and thank you for participating in that. I went down to the Metropolitan Correction Center to just sort of see firsthand what was going on. The U.S. Marshals and all these people who are supposed to make sure that people like Jeffrey Epstein don't accidentally hang themselves. And got a lot of viewership on that. Want to thank everybody who checked out that video. But it's interesting to note that even with 20,000 viewers on that video, many of which probably were not subscribers to Crowdsource the Truth, there's only like about 50 new subscribers, which I found pretty strange. We're having a tough time getting past 82,000. And as Dr. Corsi said on his new regular show, Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America, it seems quite obvious that there's some suppression of some of the things that we're trying to do online.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about that. But there are quite a few episodes. I love it from time to time that people think that they're going to out-tweet me or whatever. They send me some tweet. When are you going to show us some detail? Like, oh, man.
Oh, right. So that's the other thing I wanted to remind people of, is that if they really want to get into the details and doing their own research into anything that you have said, Charles, each video, generally speaking, there's a limited number that don't have this, but almost every one of the 171 videos is going to have a link to download the presentation, and you may have to click read more, but you just come on here into the video description and you click on that link, and you're going to be able to review all of the information that Charles discusses in that particular episode.
Yeah, and it's a very well done playlist, and lots of good shows, lots of good things to consider, and very interesting. I'm new to this, and you're the Hollywood veteran, but to me, if you had asked me how many episodes there were of Seinfeld, I would have guessed 600 or something like that, some large number.
Yeah.
Because it was on forever.
Yeah.
And I think the number is less than 100.
We're sneaking up on The Simpsons, Charles.
Is that? That's pretty funny. We should try to do a Simpsons show.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here we begin, and this news-packed, really not even a week, 48 hours.
Yeah.
We start with the New York Post, which you were kind enough, Jason, to send this to me yesterday. Here are the pictures, some pictures of Epstein as he's wheeled into the hospital. And now let's think about this for a second, okay? The guy, he couldn't, I don't think, have knifed himself or shot himself. The suspicion is he maybe either fell down hard and tried to break his neck, or
he hung himself.
Or he hung himself.
Yeah.
Now, if you are in the process of hanging yourself, maybe the guards rushed in 30 seconds after he tried it. But I just find it highly unlikely that he would still have been alive had he actually successfully hanged himself, and that if he were alive, he could have, remained alive inside the correctional center as they were in theory trying to revive him. Then inside whatever ambulance ride, as they in theory were trying to get him through, if there was traffic, from that place to wherever the hospital was, and then for however long he remained alive in the hospital. That to me is really surprising.
Yeah.
Many forget the issue of why did he go on suicide watch? Why did he then get taken off suicide watch? Why weren't guards checking on him? Is that the picture of his nose you were thinking of?
Well, I mean, it does sort of look a lot like, this thin sliver of the face looks very similar to pictures we've seen of Jeffrey Epstein, but, someone sent me these pictures and said, it's not Epstein. And obviously, that's something to consider. I was looking at the curvature of his nose here, and it looks more curved to me than other pictures I've seen of Jeffrey Epstein. I think that Epstein had a nose to me that looked almost as if he'd had plastic surgery. It looks very straight, Jeffrey Epstein's nose. I know a lot of Jewish people, myself included, have a slightly curved, sort of front edge. I mean, look at this. Oh, I guess you can't see it there, Charles, but the audience right now can see very, very straight line on Jeffrey Epstein's nose in this photograph. And then the person who is on the gurney here seems to have a much more noticeable curvature to his nose. So I don't know, maybe I'm nitpicking. It does look a lot like Jeffrey Epstein, but I think it would be good if they would release some more official evidence.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've got to know the whole timeline. We've got to know when he actually died. We should see the body. We should see, we should have, if there is a reputable person associated with the Justice Department, stand up and, swear, however you would swear, that this is what really happened. I mean, this is not, you don't get, on the heels of Jim Comey deciding that the Attorney General doesn't matter, he's going to decide that Hillary Clinton should get off. And he's going to just rewrite the regulations of the Justice Department and clear her. And somebody's going to allow all these special treatments for all these Clinton aides, while they then bust down Roger Stone's door and bust down. You can't. This doesn't work. And the longer it takes now for Barr and the other people to rewrite the scales of justice, the more treacherous this ground becomes. And I hope that the top people of the Justice Department, the FBI, and everywhere else, their vacations need to be canceled. I don't care what they were doing.
Well, the U.S. Marshals, as I understand it, are the guys that are overseeing the safety of prisoners and stuff.
Again, that's, the buck stops here at the top. And I remember being involved in situations where, fortunately I was close to the top or at the top of something, and 2 levels down somebody had made a gigantic error. And you start thinking about making excuses for it until you realize, holy shit, if I let this error stand, people are going to say it's my fault.
Yeah.
And that's where this is now. This isn't about, blaming it on some guy in some correctional facility. What was the plan to bring Epstein in and get him convicted? When was that plan hatched? Who was leading the charge there? And how did this go so badly wrong? Now, we should pause for a second and say there is a small percentage probability, I believe that he is dead, but I'd like to see proof, right? There is a small percentage probability that this is an elaborate ruse that has already gone wrong to try to get him out of that prison into a place where he can be dry cleaned and be sure that he is in fact safe.
Well, but Acosta told us he's intelligence, so the notion that an intelligence agency or more than one would have a plan to get him out of there is not that far-fetched.
Right, and of course there are allegations that the Brits have an interest in this, Mossad and others. So the other thing that is jarring to me here is, as in the case of Peter Smith. In Peter Smith's case, we have my personal accounting of the fact that he seemed to be forward-looking and in excellent spirits, right? Less than 24 hours before, quote, he killed himself.
Right.
Thinking about pursuing specific plans that I had suggested to him to approach the Obama Foundation and explain to them that the Clinton Foundation is going down, and if the Obama Foundation continues to follow the path set by the Clinton Foundation, it will go down too. And so we had a lengthy conversation, almost 25 minutes or thereabouts, less than 24 hours before Peter Smith was found in suspicious circumstances. And now we have these reports coming out of the Metropolitan Correctional Center that the normally reserved Epstein seemed to be in good spirits.
On the day that he committed suicide?
During his incarceration.
That's weird.
So I mean, it just, and I think you found the Peter Smith blog.
Oh yeah.
And that's something I had not seen before.
Here it is.
Yeah. And what's interesting here is that he has 2 blog entries. Somebody has 2 blog entries up, posted the day before he dies.
Yeah.
And just writing this stuff. I don't think he had somebody else write it for him. Writing the stuff or getting it into the blog, 2 separate ones. Thinking about would would he benefit from a board of directors? That's kind of rich. But
you know what I find strange about this blog, Charles? Peter Smith was 81, right?
84.
84. And I mean, this is not like Blogger or Medium or something. This looks like a pretty sophisticated web page. I guess he was involved with some web development companies before?
He had various business interests, but my understanding is that some of them were involved in database management. He wasn't a computer rube like me. I mean, I don't know that he was super sophisticated like you, but he certainly had been operating in and around the area for decades.
I mean,
but I'm just talking about the logistical thing of, you know, you're going to go over to Walmart and get some supplies and do all this stuff that nobody seems to understand why he would have all these spare cans of this and that. And then you say, well, you know, before I go to Walmart, why don't I do 2 blog entries on my blog about one of them being whether Donald Trump should have a board of directors. I mean, I'm not buying it. It's not the mindset, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't have to make sense to me, but a real investigator, and you are the one who went up there with someone, we will not use the person's name.
Pepper Stanley.
Pepper Stanley, okay. And you, I believe, you can speak for yourself, of course, but you were told that by the local authorities that they just didn't have the resources.
Yeah, they said in a phone call, we had asked them a bunch of questions about evidence that didn't match, crime scene evidence that didn't match the video footage from the Walmart. They said that, you know, this happened a year ago. They're a small department. It was taken over by the federal authorities. And the officer actually said, from what you're telling me, Jason, it sounds like you have more evidence about this than we did.
Right.
So he really had nothing to add. The last piece I wanted to put in there, of course, with any computer users, there's a spectrum. You know, you got somebody who's 20 and a programmer creating their own whatever. And then, you know, sort of people who are the older generation where computers were a new thing at some point in their life. And when I look at, let's say, you and Dr. Corsi, for instance, Dr. Corsi is more focused on the computer. Like I'm working with him like, hey, here's a link to post on your YouTube channel and stuff like that. He knows how to do that sort of stuff. But I would not expect Dr. Corsi to go and create his own webpage.
Right.
He has a blog on, you know, Patreon or some sort of pre-made thing that allows you to add entries. That Peter Smith blog stands out to me a little bit in that it's not medium.com, it's not blogger.com, it's not some predetermined thing where you sign up for an account and just start typing. That was like web layout and everything, like pretty sophisticated looking. That seems odd to me.
Yeah, yeah. So we don't have to hit this third link because we've covered it. We've asked the question of why did Epstein get off suicide watch? You know, there has to be something in the prisoner's record of, you know, a meeting on the subject of, you know, should he stay in suicide watch or not, and what are the regulations that determine it, and there has to be some sort of extensive internal record. And of course we're going to discover that overnight there was a fire or there was a flood.
There hasn't even been a clear determination as to when it was lifted.
Right. I'm just saying, get ready for the next wobbly. You know, like, unbeknownst to us, you know, there's Con Edison had a weather alert, or the dog ate the homework, or whatever.
Yeah.
But then we have this. This is actually very funny. This blogger type guy. Well, actually, this is not a blogger. This is an African American woman who used to, I think, work in the Trump organization, and is now an HUD. She was on television recently to react to President Trump's comments about Baltimore and Elijah Cummings and all that kind of stuff. She did a very effective interview. But here she tweets out that Epstein was, quote, Hillaried. And, you know, the internet is on fire right now. I mean, the mainstream press is on fire because Donald Trump has retweeted a very funny video of somebody making light of this and, you know, suggesting that it was indeed the Clintons who had Epstein killed. But, you know, at what point, my father, who's a scientist, is fond of saying that, you know, think of all the coincidences that you don't spot before you get excited about what the coincidences that you do see. What's a normal number of coincidences? How many, you take, you know, the Ronald Reagan presidency, for example. how many people died under mysterious circumstances, after, just at crucial points as it seemed like they were getting closer and closer to finding the truth. I mean, it's just, it stands out. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist, and we'll get to it in a second, that Hillary Clinton is, her entire life has been, running conspiracies and then accusing anyone who questions her of being a conspiracy theorist. That's too quaint by half. So right away, this Nothing But Crap Network, NBC, look at this story that they put out here. I mean, Trump boosts conspiracy theorists flourishing online. Now, let's just hang on a second here. What network was involved saying that Trump was an agent of the Russian government for 2 years until Mueller said, nah?
Wasn't that MSNBC?
And NBC.
Does NBC own MSNBC?
I think it does. Yeah. I think it does. But I mean, right away. This is yesterday. I guess is that 3 o'clock in the morning, August 10th. It's 3:24. It says. I guess it must be published at 3:24 in the morning. Trump retweets this funny interview of a until recently unknown blogger. Here he is. Conservative comedian Terrence K. Williams.
He's funny.
He's very funny. Yeah, this is really, really funny. And how many views does it have? Only 4.4 million views.
It was 2.8 when I looked last night.
Yeah.
He's doing, I bet you he's booking gigs.
There's a nice Bill Clinton face.
That's a good frown for Bill Clinton that we haven't used yet. And it's funny because the response from the New York Times was just adamant that Trump made this statement. I guess what they said was, with no evidence, but that seems not entirely accurate to me because there's quite a bit of evidence to support such a statement. We even did a show not that long ago with Larry Klayman and Jack Cashel about Ron Brown and the body of evidence surrounding his death. I apologize for the noise there, Charles. We are trying to go with windows today to save on air conditioning. And
no worries.
Getting the sounds of New York City outside there.
Hopefully that's not people coming for us.
Yeah, it could be. Anyway.
Good. And then here, this is, could be one of the rare times where I agree with AOC. She's demanding, in this MSN story, she's demanding that there be clear explanations about Epstein.
Oh, boy, she makes a lot of demands.
She is demanding. Yeah, she's a high-maintenance person, I think.
She calls for answers. Like, what role does she think she has? She's not the attorney general. She's not the president, the vice president, the co-president.
She's the future of America.
Oh, my God. That's scary.
It is.
She got great teeth, though. Yeah. Well, we need answers, lots of them. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She also needs answers to basic questions about economics. She doesn't seem to understand that very well. Anyway.
Don't rush her, Charles.
In theory, I was out with somebody yesterday who seemed to think that they were walking back into the investigation idea of the FBI doing one and the Horowitz doing one, but I believe those investigations are in full swing. Now, I'd like to know who in the FBI is going to be able to investigate the Epstein matter.
Who in the FBI is going to investigate this Epstein problem, Charles?
Because the Epstein news has pushed off the front page the idea that Peter Strzok was so aptly named. He was cheating on his wife and cheating on his mistress. So far we know about 2 mistresses, 1 wife.
Right. How
many other people? This guy's like the head of counterintelligence of the FBI. The idea that he would know nothing about Epstein's shenanigans going way back to 2000, he's got to have known something about it.
Well, I guess he could argue he was looking in a place he thought he might have found evidence of Jeffrey Epstein.
That's right, exactly. So the FBI, in theory, is investigating, and the FBI has to redeem itself. It has to restore the American people's faith and trust in it, in the institution.
I don't know if that's possible.
well, maybe it isn't, and maybe we have to, take bits and pieces of the FBI and put it into some new organization and get rid of all 17 of the ones that we, in theory, have and prune it down to a more manageable number. But so the FBI has opened an investigation, and supposedly Barr, in theory, he released the statement. It's actually right here. The second link is his statement from yesterday. He is livid and has told Horowitz, and again, I don't know how happy I am about that yet, but Horowitz supposedly is going to do an independent look at the circumstances of Epstein's death, and that cannot be classified. That's got to be out in the open.
William Barr says, I was appalled to learn that Jeffrey Epstein was found dead early this morning from an apparent suicide while in federal custody. Mr. Epstein's death raises serious questions that must be answered. In addition to the FBI's investigation, I've consulted the Inspector General, who's opening an investigation into the circumstances of Mr. Epstein's death.
Yeah, and that was updated August 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So if we...
And I wonder if the findings will corroborate President Trump's tweets.
Yeah. Now, this is an interesting tweet, and lawyers can verify this, but apparently if Epstein is still alive, then people would be able to impede access to the evidence seized from his various properties, the one in New York, and I don't know if they've seized evidence from Zorro Ranch out there in New Mexico or his apartment in Paris, or evidence that is certainly likely to be down in Little John Island and Petite St. John Island, whatever it's called.
Little St. James.
St. James, rather.
Charles, I don't know, is this person a lawyer, Adam Klasfeld?
I don't know.
Because this seems like an optimistic tweet. I definitely agree that there's some sort of complicated legal strategy tied to killing him. I mean, it's obvious that he won't be able to testify if he's dead. But I also think that what that guy's saying there is step one, and lawyers are thinking 50 steps ahead. Like, we'll kill him, then we'll destroy all the evidence, and then it'll be like, who do you blame?
Yeah. Well, in this case, as I opened with, I mean, there's so much evidence out there. I mean, think of the 170 previous episodes. I mean, all the links that we put out there, and many suspicious ties, and we're going to get into more of them today, between and among Epstein, Clinton, and not simply Bill Clinton, but the many members both of his family and who operate in these false front charities, all being connected to Epstein or Maxwell or both of them. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there for people that you can't destroy, because it's independently, it's housed in other countries and other organizations. It must be maintained out there in the public domain as part of tax filings, which are in the public domain.
On the topic of Barr, we've got a lot of people in the comments talking about this issue of, did Donald Barr hire Epstein or not? And we know it's an established fact that Donald Barr left and then Jeffrey Epstein came in. But the timing is so close that it begs the question, was there something going on that...
Yeah, to me, I think it's the bigger question is, what did Epstein tell Dalton about his background to get him whatever position he may have gotten at Dalton? See, I'm going to flat out state that in 1974, when he supposedly started at Dalton, that's the year I graduated from high school, there is no way on earth that he would have been offered a job at Dalton without telling them that he had a college degree. There's just no way. In that time frame, that was a tough period. The economy was in free fall. We had the war in the Middle East. We had the aftermath. We had oil prices skyrocketing. We had the stagflation. We had all sorts of problems. We also had, of course, Nixon leaving in the summer. I mean, it was Vietnam aftermath. I mean, it was chaos at that time frame. And there's no way a private school as reputable as Dalton would say, "Oh yeah, good idea here. Why don't we hire some guy who managed not to make it through 2 successive schools 2 years in a row, and doesn't have a college degree. That guy is the guy we're going to let teach our precious young kids." That didn't happen. So he probably lied on whatever resume he may have concocted to get whatever job he may have gotten at Dalton, and he couldn't even keep that. You know, and he has a constant record of not being able to keep jobs, or worse, getting fired or getting involved in Ponzi schemes. So,
Free MPG reminds us that Epstein was 21. He was very young for a teacher to be hired at Dalton.
yeah, extreme. Well, it was.
They would know that he didn't
21.
graduate from college if he's only 21.
But that's. I mean, I remind you and remind our viewers that in college we had this. I'm sure all colleges have this, but we have. You know, Yale has this. Their newspaper is the Yale Daily News, and typically the first issue is a profile of the incoming freshman class, and it's, you know, this person is an Olympic quality skeet shooter, and this person is an expert on, you know, Greek language, this person is a star basketball player, this person is, you know, whatever. And my brother was the year, I guess he was 2 years after me, and in his class, you know, we're looking at this newspaper, and it says, this guy is the most remarkable person, got a perfect score on his SATs, enters with all these advanced placement credits. Where the part that made me suspicious was this part, where he has made $20 million selling used farm equipment in Brazil.
What?
And with the proceeds of that, he's resurrected a dead American Indian language. And I thought
who was that? Epstein?
No, this is a guy in 1976 who got into Yale.
Wow.
And you know, this guy was a handsome guy from California, athletic, and you know, the ladies just jumped all over him. And and you know, as would happen then, you'd arrive and you'd say, well, I'm not going to take the freshman level classes. You know, I'm going to take junior level this and senior level that and graduate this and whatever. And he's you know, asserting that he could take all these really tough classes, right? And so the way Yale works, it's a trimester system. So towards the middle of the trimester, you start having, you know, papers that you have to put in and exams and things. And wouldn't you know it, the guy, you know, gets sick. I can't hand in his paper, I'm sick. I can't take the exam, I'm sick. And it doesn't take too long for the Yale people to say, wait a minute, let's check this out. Turns out the guy was like a 38-year-old carpenter who got stoned with a friend of his who was really smart and said, why don't we see if we can get you into Yale? And you know, they put the application in. Not only does Yale accept him, but they give him a full ride.
Wow.
And for that, because he secured financial assistance under false pretenses, he went to jail.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's not, as I say, these fraudsters, they have no moral compass, but they try to get away with the most outlandish schemes possible.
But I don't know if that qualifies as smart. That guy got nailed.
Right.
Stupid.
The whole thing. You know what I'm saying? These are not people who you know, are just incoherent on the street corner. These are people who, you know, have an idea they think is brilliant, and they decide to take these crazy risks. And look how far Epstein got, right? All these mansions, all this and that, and I'm sure one thing. I think I was among the first people before this most recent stuff happened on your show to just call utter bullshit on Epstein's background.
Absolutely, you've been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah, and so this we are now going to find out, because there'll be civil lawsuits against his estate. We're going to find out just exactly how rich this guy is. And people are going to be shocked when they see, on the one hand, yes, he was living in a house. We'll see what loans are against those houses. We'll see what unsecured loans there may be around the world. We're going to see all kinds of stuff. It's not going to be pretty. So we're now in a place where we have been talking about this two-tier system of justice. Zero Hedge has a story here. You know, you look at these top FBI officials, McCabe and others. You know, the FBI starts looking into their own. They say, you know what, we really can't throw the book at these FBI people, you know, because
what?
Yeah, and on the other hand, we can take a guy like Michael Flynn, who I think is an American hero. I believe for much of his life he was a Democrat.
Yeah.
And you know, so. For all of my life, I have not been a Democrat, nor will I be a Democrat. I don't like either parties, but
well, he was appointed to the DIA by Obama.
Right, and so here's a guy that we're going to. Well, but he then went right up Obama's ass
and said, "You guys created ISIS," and they're like, "Ooh, fire him, ruin his life."
Exactly. But we can't have this system, and maybe this is a check and balance that wasn't thought through or has never been thought through properly on the intelligence services. There is no effective oversight of these services, because what they do, you witness in the D class, that Trump has ordered the D class, and can't do that. We're reviewing it. We're making sure that sources and methods aren't compromised. They have all these fancy sounding excuses and sentences where you say, oh yeah, sources and methods, wouldn't want to compromise those. Yeah, take as much time as you want. Why don't you run this out past the November 2020 election? So if nothing else comes out of all this, if we never learn the truth about Epstein, at a minimum, what we have to do is reform the FBI, the intelligence services, the checks and balances. It's just completely out of balance now. People with money can buy the influence they want, either to get favors out of government, many times their donations, or to stop or make prosecutions go away. And that is not right. That has got to be changed. And we've got to change it with a hard precedent. A good precedent to set here would be to say, these people who thought they were too big to jail, you can go visit them.
In a bigger jail.
In a bigger jail, which is kind of a very unpleasant place that you might not want to visit. You might just want to make the Supermax out in Colorado, wherever, Florence, Colorado or something. Make that, put up a nice inn next to that and have a museum of fraudsters there, and put a bunch of these people in as far up the chain as if we need to go to Mueller and Comey and Loretta Lynch and Holder and Clinton, all Clintons and Obama, all these people. They're innocent until proven guilty, but they need to go through an investigation, tough investigation, many perspectives, many countries, many levels. They need to be investigated, they need to be sworn under oath, none of these fancy immunity agreements, none of that crap. They need to get treated the way every American who is investigated, is treated. And if they're innocent, government can't prove their case, fine. But if they're guilty, see ya.
Yeah. Charles, I thought you were planning to break ground on the Museum of Fraudsters in Little Rock on January 22nd, 2021.
January 20th.
20th?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well.
Yeah, you got the
perfect.
dates wrong. I wouldn't want you to show up on the wrong day.
I'll be there on the wrong day, exactly. Well, that'll be good.
So with that, I want to, before we get into this in more depth, I think people in the audience would accept the notion that when Bill Clinton was sworn in after the George Malaprop H.W. Bush, deservedly getting plaudits for liberating Kuwait, but then somehow managing to go from a 90% approval rating, which is I think the highest that modern presidents have ever gotten, to actually losing a presidential election against this Rube Clinton.
Who had that 90?
HW, yeah.
No, that's a doctored number.
No, it's not a doctored number. It's
People actually liked him.
After liberation of Kuwait, of course they did. That was the first time the U.S. military had. We threw off the legacy of Vietnam, and that was a tour de force where actually they, Nick Brady and others actually raised a bunch of money. They got Japan and many other countries to cough up mega money to finance that. And it was a decisive victory, very quick victory. So yeah, he was up at 90%, and somehow he manages to lose, right? Well, Bill Clinton, in that election, and these are the stats from Wikipedia, they may not be perfect, he won 32 states, he won 370 electoral votes, but importantly, he only won 43% of the popular vote in 92 because Ross Perot got close to 20% of the popular vote. So you look at this and you say, Bill Clinton immediately claimed, I've got a mandate, a clear mandate. Donald Trump, in contrast, he won 30 states, so 60%. He won 56.5% of the electoral votes using 538, which I don't know if that's the correct number or not. I think some were contested. And a higher percentage of the popular vote than Bill Clinton won in 1992. But right away the press is like, the resistance, Hillary's out there, the purple clown suit, Bill with the purple clown tie. Everybody thinks that we're going to lead a resistance, and it's ongoing in 2019. And the media was all in, hailing Bill Clinton, the man from hope, in November of 1992. They then went after him for a bunch of scandals, but never brought him down successfully while he was president. But in Trump's case, it's interesting, there was bigger population in 2016. Trump he played the strategy correctly. It's not. We don't have a system where the popular vote wins.
Right.
People need to check. The smartest woman in the world should kind of check those rules.
Well, she's working on the "you deserve to be believed" system.
Exactly.
And she needs to exonerate people of crimes she's accused them of.
Right. Exactly. So so Trump, I think there's an element of truth to the fact that a big element of truth that he never had a honeymoon period in his presidency. Indeed, the media and never-Trumpers in the Republican Party and others have been obstructing his presidency. Even now they're obstructing it. And obstructing it, not as effectively as the obstructors might believe they're obstructing it, but obstructing it nonetheless. So when we think back to what happened in '93, I was struck by it. I hadn't really been paying close attention. I was busy doing investment banking at that time. I was very busy with doing deals all over the place. But I was struck by the fact that Bill Clinton came in and one of his first acts was to fire all the incoming U.S. attorneys, 93 U.S. attorneys. So what that does is that disrupts investigations.
And court cases,
and
right?
all of them, because you've got to now bring a new person.
New comes in. Think of how many documents get lost or misinterpreted.
Right, and so people say that well, that's not unusual. Reagan may have done this.
No, firing them all. It is unusual.
Well, this article claims that Reagan. This CBS News article claims that Reagan did it, but Reagan wasn't under an active investigation, and Clinton was. For his various messings about in Arkansas.
But did Reagan actually do that?
I haven't checked it. So, but the point is, Bill did do this on the heels of his 43% popular mandate. I mean, that to me, we're supposed to have a co-equal three-branch system of government, and what we see in these Clintons and the Obamas and George W. Bush, we see presidents willing to go and say, I'm the President of the United States. I give the launch order on the nuclear weapons kind of stuff. The military does report to me. I'm going to overreach here, and by the time the courts catch up to me, I will have made my whatever I wanted to do. That is the law of the land, because it'll happen.
Yeah.
You can punish me after the fact, but I'll get it done. And so there needs to be, I think, a rebalancing of all that. And there also needs to be an understanding that Clintons, Americans are proving, frankly, those who, particularly I walked from where I live south of here up to your place, and there were these two very unattractive people with, in effect, a Hillary t-shirt saying, I'm proud to be a nasty woman.
Yeah.
I mean, who's proud to be nasty?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of weird. I mean, maybe most of Hollywood, but, ordinary people shouldn't be proud to be nasty. So what Hillary Clinton does is she's masterful at accusing people of doing just what she's doing.
That's Saul Alinsky, isn't it?
Yeah, that is her. So the first thing you need to do whenever, she comes with accusations, and those come on a regular basis, after the effects of the Chardonnay have worn down, at some point when she gets up at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. in the afternoon, whenever she starts tweeting, she'll accuse, now it's Trump's a racist.
He's a conspiracy theorist for tweeting that. Oh, I meant to say before, when you were bringing up conspiracy theories, isn't it interesting that just days ago, the Phoenix FBI field office releases this document that online conspiracies are dangerous and a new form of domestic terrorism. So now they have this sort of huge dragnet where if you say, they even said in the document, people who think there's a worldwide network of elite pedophiles are conspiracy theorists. Oh, and Epstein dies the next day.
Yeah. But this is taken from the transcript. This day should be meaningful to you, Jason. It's January 27th, 1998, 2 days before the IRS gives the Clinton Foundation its federal tax exemption on the basis of a false and materially misleading application when Bill was president. And it's, let's just get this straight. When was he? He was impeached at the end of '98 and cleared in February of '99. So it's before the whole impeachment thing drags out. It's as Bill Clinton is going around wagging his crooked finger, saying, I did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. But this is 2 days before it. She was quoted, according to Matt Lauer, who's also been disgraced, that she was viewing what was going on in the Clinton presidency as, quote, the last great battle, and that one side or the other is going down here, right? And so Hillary tries to brush it back. I don't know if I've been that dramatic, but I do believe that this is a battle. They have popped up in other settings. This is the great story here for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it, is this vast right-wing conspiracy that's been conspiring against my husband.
It seems like a theory.
Yeah, well, exactly. It is a theory, a raving. But the point is that the conspiracy, the real conspiracy, I don't care whether it's right-wing or left-wing, it is just a straight-up conspiracy, is to use fake charities and fake entities as ways to trade money for influence and influence for money. It's that simple. And that's what these people have been doing their entire adult lives, as far as I can tell, and getting away with it. So how have they managed to do this? How have they managed to continue criminal activity that escalates over so many years? And why is nobody willing to stand up and get the job done?
They saw the movie about Jeffrey Epstein, Vince Foster, Ron Brown, and all those other guys.
They don't want to be in the movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I thought that we might just go back over a few interesting time periods. We've got 5 more slides that we'll do relatively quickly. We go back, this is the period when Bill is now out of office. It's his post-presidency. Doug Band is putting that together for him, according to Doug Band. And, in this time frame, from September 4th, 2001, Mueller is the FBI director. Comey, later in 2001, early 2002, becomes first the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and then the Deputy Attorney General. FBI reports to him. We know, we've got a link, we'll show it to you yet again, that the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation were under active FBI investigation for almost 4 years. They're refusing to see obvious massive crimes, giving deference to these people for as yet unknown reasons. And as we've explained, Director Mueller was an important figure in this. He absolutely was briefed, we have proof of that, on the FBI investigation into the Clintons. It was a sensitive matter. Hillary was originally named for public corruption. By February or thereabouts 2001, she didn't even manage, or maybe March, she didn't even manage to get in 90 days service, public service as a U.S. Senator without falling under suspicion in an active investigation for fraud and corruption.
That's so good.
That's the smartest lady in the world.
Right.
Smartest person in the world. Rod Rosenstein at this point, I believe, has lied on the summary of his resume. He lied on the fact that he had interviewed Hillary Clinton in connection with the travel office firings. He leaves that part of his experience off his official resume, but other places you find it. He then goes into the Department of Justice, and he sits on top of the department that is supposed to decide which frauds get prosecuted. And then you get Comey in there. Comey's your man. When the Clintons need to be covered up, Comey's leading for the Justice Department. He's the U.S. Attorney on point against the Clinton Foundation. And then he's promoted from that to make sure that nothing gets done. He gets put in as Deputy Attorney General with the FBI reporting to him. So if Mueller makes a mistake, Comey can send him scurrying away from the heart of the issue. So the point here is that the scandals, these Clinton scandals, are connected to Epstein in this important time frame, 2001 to 2005. Why? We have, and here I have the link here, you can go to page 44 of the PDF. Mike Cernovich has 2 portions of this extensive document dump that came out up on his site. It's too long to really read carefully for this broadcast, so I didn't want to try to rush through and miss things. I figured let other people do a lot of reading, and then maybe we'll have more to say on this in coming weeks.
There's a lot of questions surrounding Mike Cernovich's motives for, his close involvement with this case, and Alan Dershowitz and all that.
Right, but I'm just on this one. I'm narrowly focused on I actually have the excerpt in the slide, so that you can just read it, and people can check it by going. This is really fascinating stuff. This is Maxwell responding, Ghislaine Maxwell responding to charges by, I think it's Virginia Giuffre Roberts, saying from August 2001 until September 2002, this is under oath, she's saying, Epstein and Maxwell were almost entirely absent from Florida on documented travel unaccompanied by plaintiffs. So Virginia Roberts, not on the plane. But it says here that that Epstein's principal pilot, David Rogers, had logs for the period August 2001 through September 2002. And this is multiple times. It's not just Bill Clinton. It's Bill Clinton, Ira Magaziner, other people involved with the Clinton Foundation. Were on their multiple planes. But what the revelation out of this that I got is Rogers maintains a log of all flights, right? But Epstein additionally traveled with another pilot who did not keep such logs. And he also flew commercial, which is...
I got some questions about these logs, Charles, because outside the courthouse, the Second Circuit Court, where I spoke with Alan Dershowitz briefly, people might remember, he said that he had been to the island, but he had never been on the plane. So that would seem to contradict the evidence presented in these logs and suggests that perhaps either Dershowitz is not being truthful or these logs are not able to be relied on. They are just written in pencil or pen by a person who conceivably could write whatever they want.
I think, to maintain your various licenses and this and that, you have to, I believe it may be a requirement that pilots do have to, particularly on international travel, keep track of who's on every plane.
Well, right, but it's also a requirement that you don't rape 14-year-olds, and they seem to have forgotten about sticking to that rule.
Right, but what I'm saying to you is that, to me, it might not mean that much about a pilot's log, but to a pilot who wants to stay employed as a pilot and keep the licenses and whatever, I think you probably do have to, particularly on international flights, maintain accurate records. But the thing that's significant to me is the accuracy issue is one thing, but the interesting thing to me is that at least in this response, they're alleging there's at least one more pilot they knew about, and that they knew that pilot didn't keep such logs. So, here you have, let's just say, to put it, nicely, that you have a very leaky, sieve-like organization here, where Epstein's or somebody is directing this, and very clearly, we know that presenting a log is not going to prove to be conclusive evidence of what may or may not happen in a plane. So why then did Bill Clinton so quickly, when he was giving his refutation, he said, yes, I did fly it. I took 4 trips, trying to be very specific. It's a kind of Clintonian defense, hoping that we're not going to get to the bottom, we're going to accept the idea.
The limited hangout is the idea.
Exactly. So this suggests to me that if you had the team that was investigating Dr. Corsi and the team that was investigating Manafort or is investigating Manafort, go back over this with hard edges and say, these logs are out there. We know the tail numbers of the planes. These planes have histories of where they've been. Experts can figure all this stuff out. Now let's start asking witnesses who people who are supposedly on these planes. And I'll pick on one guy. There's a guy called Eric Nonax, Nonacs, who was very actively involved in the Clinton Foundation as director, I think, of international operations for a charity that had no authority to do any international work. And he was a highly paid guy in the context of the Clinton Foundation pay scales in that time frame, roughly 2002, 3 or thereabouts and forward, very intimately involved in the Justra operations, on the board of the Justra entity, even perhaps still now. Fancies himself an expert on charities. He has lots and lots of, has a big resume. And he's on these flight logs. Ira Magaziner is on these flight logs. One needs to take each of these people apart and say, within the confines of the law, of course, and say, you're going to need to answer some very serious questions here. And then we're going to put you before a grand jury. And you can't have the benefit of your lawyer in front of that grand jury. We would then, or the people leading the investigation would then very quickly, I think, get to the bottom of what was going on in this crazy period, 2001 through 2004 and 5, when the Clintons were hoping that idiot John Kerry would win in 2004 and that W. Bush would disappear. What was going on with this Clinton Foundation? With many of our previous presentations, we've explained that in this 2001 to 2005 timeline, there were no audits which were required. There's no, the financial statements that exist appear to be invented. They're using the fictional method of accounting, which is not allowed. BKD, a highly suspicious, at least Little Rock operation, highly suspicious accounting firm that should have long ago renounced the financial statements that are still floating around in the public domain as having been, quote, audited by BKD for the period 2001 through 2004 and then 5, when they really weren't audited properly. They should have long ago have disavowed all that work, and they didn't. And here's Epstein, lending his plane and flying around Africa and around the world over to Norway to meet with the Prime Minister of Norway. There are records in Norway that confirm that meeting occurred, to articulate a vision of how the Clinton Foundation, with Epstein's help, was going to be doing all this international work. And none of these boneheads, bothered to say, why don't we ask a real lawyer, what the rules are in the state where Bill Clinton used to be Attorney General and Governor about charities.
Do you know any lawyers that dress up as tigers? They seem to have better information about this sort of thing.
You should get a lawyer dressed up as a lizard.
Well, that would just be a naked lawyer.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. That's part of the NXIVM cult. So, also we've talked about this, but here's a way of sort of connecting the dots slightly differently. In 2011, Simpson Thacher, a fine law firm where at age 18 I worked for a summer there as a proofreader, it's an eminent firm, and the person who was leading the charge studying the Clinton Foundation supposedly was somebody who actually wrote the definitive book on New York nonprofit corporation law. She's written, co-author, but with multiple editions. I think at least 4 separate editions. This is a tome. It's the kind of book that I don't like to read, and I guess you wouldn't like to read either, filled with legal precedents and long arguments of this and that.
I'm becoming very used to reading those things.
But this person, and here's the link to that was via WikiLeaks to their work, accepted the lie that they were doing a 10-year review, that the foundation was established by Bill Clinton in 2001, when we know that wasn't the case. Foundation was established. It was actually incorporated October 23rd, 1997 in Arkansas, and had nothing to do with Bill Clinton officially.
What did Bill say about this claim that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in founding the Clinton?
He hasn't been, no journalist has bothered to push Bill Clinton on that.
Just pull your cell phone out of your hand the second you ask him a question he doesn't like.
Exactly. So, it's time for the remaining journalists who exist. I've been imploring in that period last year where the mainstream press was all after me trying to argue that I was financing Peter Smith's efforts to get in contact or get information from Assange. I kept trying to tell him, you've got to study this period. You guys were writing stories at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the mainstream media, Wall Street Journal, and you refuse to look at the history. And it's not like a foundation can just break the law for 19 years, but in the 20th year do it right, and it's okay. That's just not the way it works. From the day it's organized through its entire life, a foundation must comply with all applicable laws. And this Clinton Foundation doesn't believe in doing any of that. So a key question that I would have looking through the William J. Clinton Foundation FBI vault file, which we've shown you before, why are there only 3 parts to an investigation, this one here, that went on for 4 years? Why are there only, let's call it 12, estimating 1,200 pages in an investigation where people spent 4 years, supposedly teams of agents, 50, 60 agents, flying around the world, meeting with people. Why are there only 1,200 pages?
No sensible investigator would write any of that stuff down.
Right. Well, the answer is there's a lot more that they decided not to put in the public domain. And who made those calls in this period when George W. Bush was President of the United States? Now, what kind of a lesson should this send to President Donald Trump about the ability of a deep state or people who are wedded to supporting unregulated globalism and to bringing down the national Constitution of the United States? How do these people manage to continue wielding the power that they evidently have, when there's a big change in administration from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush, and when George W. Bush is reelected in 2004? How do they still, nonetheless, manage to keep these investigations at bay? I don't think there's going to be an answer we're going to like.
That FBI document, in fact, even says if you believe in the deep state, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah,
Who do you
okay.
think wrote that?
I think the person who wrote that FBI document needs to be doing some. We need to do some jujitsu moves on that person. Anyway, let's move forward to the next period, which is look at it slightly differently. We have spent a lot of time on 2007, 8, and 9 in different guises, but I wanted to pull together a few strands that we hadn't thought about in exactly the same way. So on the 20th of January 2007, maybe you weren't focused on Hillary Clinton and the way she announced, but the approach they took is prior to the announcement, they let the world know that Hillary was likely to run. She hadn't made up her final mind. But when she ran, she was going to win. And they let books have been written about this, they let it be known that if you are even remotely thinking about challenging Hillary Clinton, you are definitely in trouble. Right?
I thought you were going to say you're a sexist.
I could have said
and a
that.
racist.
And a racist.
And a
probably.
white supremacist.
Yeah.
And a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, that came later.
You might as well go home.
Yeah. So she's the presumptive person who's going to win. I mean, at this point, remember the Senate shifted. Democrats controlled the Senate. Bush was in the end of his term. He hadn't exactly distinguished himself in the beginning of his term. And we were teetering towards a financial crisis. And so she was the person everybody expected might win. So the Epstein mess had come to light, I think, in 2004-05. Somehow he manages to push it into by July 6, 2007. That's the letter that you've referenced of Acosta's people writing in and claiming, and we've been through this in some depth, that Epstein deserves leniency because of his great charitable work, in particularly co-founding a criminal operation, the Clinton-Goldman Initiative, that doesn't exist, never existed lawfully, and helping Bill Clinton break the law by gallivanting around the world doing international work when the Clinton Foundation had no authority to do international work.
That's a particularly bad excuse for showing somebody leniency, because then you're basically just motivated to make as much money as possible from doing illegal stuff, and then just give some portion of it to charity and be like, see, I'm really a nice guy.
And that's sort of how it's happened in history.
Right.
So then we learn, and we've known about this for years now, that effective the 31st of December 2007, the largest piece of the Clinton Foundation, which was operating in Massachusetts, was forbidden from continuing to operate in Massachusetts, but it kept on operating, right? And you couldn't stop then. You have the primaries coming up in January. So what happens? BKD was supposed to have issued a real audit complying with generally accepted accounting principles applicable in the United States of America and elsewhere. They were supposed to have issued that not later than November 15th, 2007. This is the work for 2006, right? This supposed false front audit comes out on the 9th of January, 2008. Now, for people who aren't familiar with these dynamics, when you do get an audit from an accounting firm that takes itself seriously, that really wants to comply with the law, there's real tension. The accounting firm is challenging the CEO and the management team. They're finding problems. They're negotiating what's called a management letter, where the accounting firm writes a letter, management writes a letter to the accounting firm saying, we know of no problems of this kind and no problems of that kind, and you've raised this issue, and we assure you that this is not a problem and that's not a problem. And the kind of things that they would likely have had to say was, we are in good standing in every legal jurisdiction where we operate, and all of our activities are authorized as federally and as tax exempt federally, and in each jurisdiction where we are soliciting and operating, soliciting funds. But instead, there's this nuclear bomb that went off on the 31st of December saying, the largest piece of the Clinton Foundation by far does not have authority to do any of its work, and it's still taking in boatloads of money that might be finding their way to fund the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. So
is that bad? Should they have not done that?
That's probably not a great idea. Maybe Epstein conceded that idea. It was Epstein's idea to do that. So anyway, BKD, this tortured accounting firm that really deserves to be disciplined extremely hard, they issue an audit for 2006 that on purpose, in my view, obscures the degree to which this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS activity, or the HIV/AIDS activities of the Clinton Foundation, the importance of the contributions and the donations and the likelihood that money had been diverted, none of this was properly explained in the 2006 audit, which we've been through many different obvious problems where they forced numbers through to disguise frauds on the magnitude, and could be approaching $100 million by that time frame.
Wow.
Okay, so then
Well done.
18. Now Hillary's in deep trouble. Dan Halper has written a great book called Clinton Inc. Came out in 2014 from memory. In that book, he alleges that the Clinton campaign had blown through $100 million by the end of January 2008, and Barack Obama was catching fire. Hillary Clinton was on fire the wrong way. She was burning to death, and burning. Each one of her appearances was worse than the next. And so in the middle of all this, with the Clintons, on the hook to many contributors had given them money, thinking that she's going to be president, they're going to get a payback when she's president. And this guy, this John Glasgow, disappears, 28th of January, 2008. Now, he's a young guy in his mid-30s, happily married, no children, money in the bank, no financial problems, CFO of a large company that had built, was a prime contractor, general contractor on the Clinton Foundation. Back in the day when the Clinton Foundation was put up in 2004, that was the largest construction project in Little Rock, for a long time frame.
Wow.
And the subsequent investigation into this shows multiple accounts of this young guy who apparently he knew the difference between right and wrong, and he did not think the accounting was proper at his construction firm. I'm going to guess that one of the problems was accounting for how much the Clinton Foundation campus in Little Rock actually cost, how much did CDI get, and why does that number that they bill for the campus not square with the gigantic sum that the Clinton Foundation asserts that was spent on this project? I'm going to guess that people were asking tough questions, and this young guy was like, I'm not going along with this, and
You're like, okay, someone's going to find your skull in a field 7 years from now.
That'll happen in 2015.
Which did happen.
Which it's in there, yeah.
That guy could be added to that comedian's routine on Twitter.
Exactly. So he disappears, and then by the 30th of June, 2008, now we've gone through in great detail other aspects of 2008. By the 30th of June, 2008, it was crystal clear that Barack Obama was going to be the next president of the United States.
Right.
McLoopy was not going to be president of the United States. There's no way. And the economy did not cooperate. And so here's, by 30 June 2008, Epstein says, okay, I know that Barack Obama is going to be president of the United States. Okay, I'll cop a deal here. I get this sweetheart deal. I'll be back on my feet. I got Obama's people, or somebody's going to have my back here. So he gets this sweetheart deal. And we have not had real reporting, solid reporting yet on why it took so much time to delay the Epstein case, and why the initial deal was so lenient, and why his treatment was so lenient when he, quote, served time, as he was being served up, more young girls, even having been convicted of being a level 3.
He said he was even meeting with some of them while he was in prison.
Right. Yeah, it's just preposterous. Again, this precedent cannot stand, because you're going to end up, being like Brazil or like these countries where it's, you go to prison, but you live like the same old way. You have your mistresses.
Prison in Brazil doesn't sound good.
Prison in Brazil, it depends. I mean, who's leading the country, but there have been moments in time where it's, you live pretty well.
Wow.
It actually was that way prior to the American Revolution in England. The same idea. You have to. People didn't make their own food, and so rich people who go to prison, for lesser crimes, live pretty well.
Wow.
On the other hand, the people were killed, gruesomely killed, for very small offenses, stealing far less money than I believe the Clinton team has stolen.
And just quickly on John Glasgow again, the construction manager guy who was killed. For a brief time, when you and I did the show about him, I tried to contact some of his surviving family, and they didn't want to.
Maybe that'll change.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll change. So it's very crucially important for the investigators who I hope are watching the show that you go and you look into the filings of the COUQ Foundation, which is the Epstein Foundation. So he goes to prison on or after the 30th of June 2008, and the filings for the COUQ Foundation sort of disappear. And we don't really understand
what that even stands for.
We don't know. Yeah, but it was an entity with substantial contributions coming from Les Wexner, this billionaire, and in theory going to Harvard and other places. But none of that has been checked. He gets under suspicion. He gets investigated. He does this deal. He was a trustee of the foundation, as was Ghislaine Maxwell and other associates. And so the papers of the COUQ Foundation need to be retrieved from inside the IRS, inside the foundation, inside New York State where it was operating. And there needs to be a cross-checking of who gave money to it, and did the money really go to the places that said it did, and how did this thing wind down so quickly, and why did a new foundation reemerge, not involving Epstein, but involving this Ghislaine Maxwell, called the Terramar Project. We've talked about that before. So with all of this firm that really cannot shoot straight, BKD, issues again late an audit for the Clinton Foundation for 2007 on December 12th, 2008. And here's an important nuance. The version of the audit which is not compliant with generally accepted accounting principles and therefore is not compliant with New York law or Massachusetts law or Michigan law or California law or many other laws, the version that BKD issues includes what are called combining statements for each of the pieces, with the largest piece being this Clinton, now they're calling it HIV/AIDS operation. That's a gigantic percentage of the total for 2007. And so well after the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has said, "Thou shalt shut this shit down." Try saying that.
Don't even have another barbecue here.
Yeah, try saying that after 2 glasses of whiskey. But anyway, this BKD issues financial statements that says, actually, we kept it open, and it was the biggest piece of the puzzle.
Wow.
And they do this in filings in certain states, in Massachusetts, California, New York, but on the main Clinton website, they obscure this. They omit the combining financial statements on purpose. So somebody in the Clinton Foundation said, wait a minute, we got a problem here. We can't, this is before the inauguration, we can't let the public see that we continue, the biggest piece of this Clinton Foundation, which is getting all the credit and the plaudits, as part of this stupid MOU, which made no sense to begin with, that Obama and the Clinton people got done right around this December 12, 2008. We can't let the public understand that the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation should have been shut down by the 31st of December 2000. That would not be helpful to the cause of our being smart, right? Or being the Secretary of State or being confirmed. So they committed a fraud on the Senate. They committed a fraud on New York State and California State. They committed a fraud on the American people between the election, November of 2008, and Barack Obama's inauguration on the 20th of January 2009. The Clintons, the Obama people around this committed, they defrauded the world, frankly. Had Americans understood, and remember what happened in Trump's case. Trump wins, and right away it's like, it's not a legitimate president. Let's have the electors change their votes. Let's do this. Let's recount. Let's do all this kind of stuff. In the case of Obama, you had straight up criminal behavior, conspiracy to obstruct this. Not only in the case of the Clinton Foundation, but we've never gotten an honest accounting of what was going on with Blagojevich, what was going on with the efforts to, in theory, Blagojevich's efforts to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat.
I thought that was all investigated and they stuck him in jail.
Blagojevich in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is he on suicide watch?
No, I don't know.
No, just. But the point being here that instead of nothing but crap media saying that right away these are conspiracy theories, these are serious questions, and I have a lot of questions, and others will have questions that just as a citizen of this country, I demand to know the answers, and I will not have confidence in the Trump administration if they don't get to the bottom of this. These are not questions that we can say, forevermore, we're just going to let, a new president wins an election, that president can decide the priorities, decide whether to respect the Constitution, change the law without going through the legislature. That's not what we have here.
Yeah.
Okay? Or should have.
Well, that's what they're trying to make it.
Yeah. So if we go to the next election, all right, I did mention I had some questions. Mueller is still the FBI director, And I submit, and when I was writing for the Washington Times and doing other things, I did a lot of pieces about this whole Arab Spring and Benghazi and what was really going on there. I mean, we talk about how absurd it is for Russia to meddle in the American election. What exactly did the Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton foreign policy do starting in 2009 in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, across the Middle East, around the world? We decided under Barack Obama that, we would figure out who should be president in Kenya and Israel and whether there should be a Brexit or not. We had that right as America. But when another country, Russia, if they did attempt to meddles inside the United States, that is a felony. I mean, that's just outrageous that another country would do that. We're sitting there, with our military all over the world, our embassies all over the world, in a sad history, frankly, of getting involved and meddling in ways in other foreign countries that have not helped America's standing. The obvious double standard here is absurd. And so we go back and we think about this time frame where Barack Obama needed to be reelected. We have a Ben Rhodes at the very end. He was the national, the idiot, frankly, whose brother was head of CBS News.
Ben Rhodes, is he related to the Rhodes Scholars?
No, the Americans. No, I don't think so. But Rhodes being South African or whatever he was originally, either South African or modern day Zimbabwean.
Probably Dutch then, no?
No, English. Okay. But English origins. But had the American public known the truth in that election by 2012, had we known, I was actually on Fox News with Neil Cavuto talking about, when I did a piece in 2012 about, Al-Qaeda is certainly not dead and GM is certainly not rescued. And I think, we're going to see, sadly, I think the car industry and GM in particular is going to walk into a brick wall again pretty soon as interest rates, if they ever start going back up again, they're in big trouble. But anyway, we did not, the news media across the spectrum did not do deep diving in this period, particularly in the pivotal 2012 period. But to go through some of the things that need to be studied and have not been studied properly, the issue with uranium-1 is not only that somehow control was passed over a critical company that had critical assets. The real issue was that prior to 2007, so in the 2005 timeframe, when the Canadian Justra was making friendly with Bill Clinton and traveling to Kazakhstan and elsewhere, a limited number of countries control a disproportionate share of the supplies of uranium and things that can be turned into the uranium fuel.
Including Kazakhstan.
Including Kazakhstan, Canada, Australia, and Russia. And so the game here was not as just, how to put together a company. This is a grand plan. This was how do we look ahead, and experts that I happen to just know personally were saying back in 2001, they were saying, looking ahead on our long-term forecast, there isn't enough fuel on the planet to support energy. The legitimate aspirations of countries that want to achieve their economic growth targets. You do the math and you say, if I want consumption of this and investment of that for the entire planet to lift the planet up, there needs to be energy put to use to make these plants and make these products work or whatever. You could do the math and you could figure it out. And there were people who, on the price curves that we were talking about back then, looked at this and said, holy shit, traditional fuels are not enough. There's opposition to uranium for the risks of the meltdowns we're seeing now in Japan and maybe in Russia that have been covered up. So let's go ahead and corner the uranium market. That's what this was. It wasn't just about some little company and some Canadian financier. It was a plot to corner the uranium market in that time frame prior to the financial crash when all the curves switched.
Do you know what just occurred to me, Charles? It's very similar in concept to what Texas oil men wanted to do in 1963. They wanted to corner the market on energy, and they controlled the commodity that was, you didn't really have nuclear power plants in 1963 as much as you do now, right? I mean, I guess it was new and everything, but people were still using fossil fuels. So they wanted to base the economy on the oil with the petrodollar, and this is the same thing, but modernized for uranium.
Yeah, I mean, in order to understand the real context, we've got to get to the bottom of these bigger scandals that are, far more important than the pesky little ones that Hillary Clinton and the Clintons like to distract us with. The next one is, who in the hell, the same way, whether Epstein was or was not on suicide watch, we're going to find out. But who in the hell authorized this toilet bowl server system? Who said that that's a bright idea? Right, we got Bill Clinton, a man who claims that he doesn't use email. All right? So we're going to house, if he doesn't use email, but he lives in Chappaqua, why does he already have a server in Chappaqua if he doesn't use email? I mean, do you have a server? Do you have a server did you have a server in your home growing up? I didn't.
No.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, so somebody's using email. Right. And we know that Hillary Clinton, is so far antiquated that she doesn't like to read emails on the computer. She likes to
have the housekeeper
go into the skiff and print them out. And she speaks Spanish, so she won't understand the English classified market. I mean, who authorized this? I mean, ordinarily speaking, when you see the people who've been in national security work, you see the documents and the warnings and whatever you can find out about how this is supposed to work. It's such a serious and obvious set of infractions. How did they contemplate doing this prior to letting her be Secretary of State? How do they have this 3-month period through April or thereabouts when the toilet bowl server system became, quotes, operational? Why did they let aides who got immunity agreements later, purchase electronic devices of old generation versions of BlackBerry, because that's what Hillary liked to use, on eBay that hadn't been vetted?
It's just unheard of.
It's ridiculous. And then, how come there wasn't regular review of this? I mean, I would have thought that if you're the FBI and you want to protect America's secrets from being, gotten by foreign powers, you look at the different transit points and you'd say, okay, well, who has access to America's secrets? Let's harden that spot where Hillary Clinton lives in Washington, D.C. in Chappaqua. Let's
just cover it over with cement while she's there.
after the trial. And
Charles, even in the corporate world, if someone suggested to you, hey, we could save $200 by buying your cell phone that all of your information will go through on eBay.
Well,
you'd never do it.
I mean, I started work June 9th, 1980 at a firm. It's out of business now, but it was a fine firm, and the rules were you could not read business papers in public. You were not allowed. I wasn't allowed to tell my then wife where I was going. For fear, she worked at Solomon Brothers, for fear that she might innocently say, well, Charles is at, this town.
And someone can extract information from that.
And they'll figure out, well, that means that Charles is down in this town, which is the only company there is a Dillon Reed client. Obviously, they're about to do something.
Right.
So that was ingrained. That's why, I've never read, for all the 11 years I was at Dillon Reed, I never read a business thing on the plane. And you got to do something when you're flying to California or Tokyo. So I got to read something. So I started reading spy novels. And that's why I have a large number of them. Anyway, so who the hell authorized this thing? I want to know. American people deserve to know, and Horowitz better the hell tell us. And then, why was Epstein released so early? July 7th, 2009. I mean, the real story here, and a friend of ours has reminded me in the recent release that Epstein bragged to somebody who was in trouble and with Palm Beach that he could get them off because he was, he knew the Palm Beach police really well.
Whoa.
And I don't doubt that at all. In Palm Beach, which is a town filled with problems and filled with rich people, and you have to run for office, I think, as the local sheriff. Mm-hmm. You need political contributions. It's an obvious way for corruption to fester. You pay off the police department and you get in trouble, and you don't get in trouble.
Former Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office Deputy John Mark Dugan is going to join me tomorrow night to talk about exactly this.
It's an excellent question. And then when we think about this time frame, here's the great Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, and others. This is an issue on financial fraud, on corruption in markets, that when you think about it for more than a nanosecond, you realize you really want to make sure that the deep and large financial markets that currently exist in the United States are in fact regulated. That when people commit crimes, and if you're involved inside a firm today, you can't use personal email.
Not even for convenience?
Not for business work. You can't. You can't do that. You've got to use, because the SEC is exactly. You trade on inside information. An easy way to do that, illegally obviously, would be to create a fictitious name, and
email people about it.
Email people, or use the draft folder as opposed to sending an email, so you're not sending or receiving. That nuance. But in this time frame, we think about. We nearly lost the entire planet's global financial system. Starting around September 2008, and I'm not being dramatic. I mean, it nearly did go down the tubes. And who has paid penalties for that? Name one individual who's spent a meaningful amount of time in prison, or other than Madoff, and he wasn't really centrally involved in convincing gullible consumers to load up on debt, mispriced debt, to buy homes that were also overvalued. Who has paid a price for that? The answer is no one. Do we think there's a possibility that the criminals who were involved in creating this financial crisis of 2007 through 9 were significant donors to both parties in the 2008, 12, and 16 election? I think there's a very high likelihood. So, how come we're not going to look into that? And when we have the next crash, which we will have a crash, that's the history of financial markets from the beginning of time, and it will always be the history of financial markets. Booms and busts, that's the way it works. Yeah. So in the same time frame, who, and I answer the question, Lois Lerner, likely, provided cover for the Clinton Foundation to say that they had reorganized themselves. The stuff that they said they didn't do. They didn't lawfully reorganize any part of the Clinton Foundation. But yet the IRS said, that's okay. What the hell? We'll put some congressman from Florida, we'll put her in prison. But, we're not going to make a big deal about, the Clintons. I mean, that's how they roll. That's how Arkansas rolls. So, and who, this Cheryl Mills person and the story of Haiti, for all these people who the second you intimate that you might be a Trump supporter, or you might be in favor of disruption, or you might be a deplorable, not because you're racist, but because you want to disrupt the system, you get all these lectures about, you Republicans and Trump, you just want to destroy black people and black communities and this and that. Well, what the hell happened when we had an African-American president in Haiti? And he gave money. He gave 200,000 plus of his Nobel Peace Prize winnings. We could debate whether those were fairly earned, but he gave $200,000 to the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund, which was a disaster. And Rod Rosenstein should have known it was a disaster, because he was the U.S. attorney in Baltimore when the major problems occurred that are related to the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund. And Cheryl Mills was centrally involved in that. And Cheryl Mills gets an immunity agreement, and we're just like, that's okay. I mean, she defended Bill Clinton in the impeachment trial, so she gets a lifetime pass.
Well, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure she was one of the people who was named as removing documents, Whitewater documents, from Vince Foster's office before they would allow federal investigators to investigate. So it's sort of like, we're going to take away all the incriminating stuff, then you can investigate.
Right, then you can see if there's a crime.
Yeah.
No,
but that activates their favorite excuse. There's no evidence. Right. You have no evidence.
That's right. Hence the title of the show, The Paper Chase. I mean, we do have evidence, and it's out there, and multiple portions of our security agencies have seen this evidence, have this evidence, know about this evidence, been sitting on this evidence, and who knows how they've been using it as leverage. So again, in this period, who went ahead and decided to round up Anna Chapman in June of 2010 as she allegedly was getting close to getting inside Hillary Clinton's office? And
how do we know that part about
There's
Anna?
A lot of reporting about this.
Oh.
And so, who decided to round her up? Why did they decide to pick the people they did pick? Why didn't they dry clean them? That is to say, keep them, get them convicted, put them in prison, or real prisons, and then see whether they're willing to flip. Why instead, prior to the midterm election of 2010, where Obama was in trouble, why instead did we rush them out of the country before they could squeal? And here, all the while, Robert Mueller is head of the FBI. I mean, this is yet another black mark in Robert Mueller's very black
Yeah, you
resume.
can't find any white marks left. It's all covered.
So on top of all this going on, who thought it was a great idea to take the guy who loves Swarthmore so much in the London School of Economics, Dennis Cheng, a young guy, to set up by June, July of 2011, when Barack Obama needed money for his reelection campaign, to set up a secret Clinton Foundation office. We visited the building, 77 Water Street, that's not reported properly in any place, which you had to report in New York. You know, who made that decision? Barack Obama is still president of the United States. You're telling me there's no emails back and forth, no record of letting this Dennis Cheng leave his deputy protocol officer job at the State Department to operate a secret foundation office to raise money for an endowment, a general purpose endowment for the Clinton Foundation, which is not allowed. You're not allowed to say, well, under the Jason Goodman Foundation, I'm just going to raise money to do whatever the hell I want to do when I decide what I want to do. It's just not allowed.
Seems good.
Yeah, it seems like a nice plan.
It's good work if you can get it, Charles.
Yeah, and then moving to 2012, who allowed Uma Abedin to hold 4 paid positions starting in late June 2012? Here's somebody, you know, with connections to the Middle East, to radical Islamic people in her family, prominent radicals. How the hell did she get vetted? You know, we talk about concerns about the Kushner and Ivanka Trump. How in the hell did Brennan's CIA? Oh, I guess I answered that question.
Yeah.
But I mean,
well, you might remember FBI whistleblower Michael McMahon was on the show a little over a year ago saying that, you know, he specifically drew attention to this vetting program, that people weren't being accurately or adequately vetted, right. And they drummed them out of the FBI.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. So, and then when we think about the foreign policies that, you know, were transformed during Obama and Clinton's tenure, these primarily involved the Middle East, the attempted Russian reset, which was a disaster, and then the allowing China and India to steal technology, secrets, to infiltrate people into our universities, the decision to let Pakistan, and some argue Iran, shelter Osama bin Laden for so long, and then magically, just when Corsi's book is coming out, say, oh, we killed Osama bin Laden. You know, I mean, nobody, the mainstream journalists are frankly, as a pack, most of them are just junky jerks. I mean, they have not done the work. These are serious questions that I've posed here in this page, and I have more questions that deserve answers. And unless you go down the track of thinking about these answers, you're not going to uncover the motivations that that Obama and Rice and others had to try to stop Trump, to stop him from being inaugurated, and put landmines under his feet as he attempted to take control of the government. Unless you go back into this history, chase down these questions, get the answers, think about the answers, think about their implications, you're not going to be doing a service in trying to drain the swamp. You've got to know the answers to these questions. So
the book in particular that you're talking about with Dr. Corsi, it was the birth certificate book.
Right. So, just a few things, and this is blowing my own horn a little bit, but I guess I get to do that on this show somewhat. Hillary's lawyers, had basically had possession of classified information above the level that they themselves were classified, which they only reluctantly turned in the 5th of December 2014. Hillary had left the State Department on the 1st of February 2013. So how in the hell did nobody ask the question, what is taking so long? This isn't her property that she can decide to. This is our property. You don't get to, once you leave the Secretary of State, you don't go and take some big jet that you were flying around the world on all your travel and say, I got some personal papers on this jet, and I'll give it back to you when I figure out what's personal and what's government. But meanwhile, I'll just put it on my lawn over here. You can't do that.
What if the papers are inside of furniture and you take the furniture? Is that okay?
That's not okay either.
That's not okay.
I mean, on the one hand, for we the little people, the rules are very strict. This is government. These are presidential records and this and that. So I highlight all of these pieces here because these came out. The 4 pieces that I focus on, I wrote other ones in Breitbart, before Hillary Clinton announced for president and before Donald Trump announced for president. Okay? The first one, I drew attention to the email scandal and the idea, this economics of political privilege, the idea that well-connected Clintons and Umar Abedin can have their secret server system and nobody's going to give a shit. It's just like, we do what we want. And then I focused on this Teneo thing, which I think will in the end, could in the end, get tarred for criminal enormity. In other words, coming out of nothing into a business now valued at who knows how much money by trading off the context gleaned in the Clinton Foundation, where Doug Band was the architect of the post-presidency. On the 12th of March 2015, the episode you're talking about, John Glasgow's remains are confirmed on the 12th of March 2015. And you can look at that and say, well, that's a while. I mean, that's like 7 years later, and why would we make such a big deal about that? And I think it's obvious. It's like, this is what happens when you cross us.
Yeah, they decapitated the guy.
Yeah, so I believe that if there is a possible murder here, there's no statute of limitations. Now, we're talking about Arkansas, and we're talking about an FBI office in Arkansas, multiple FBI offices in Arkansas, where there's a suspicion that the one in Little Rock, may not be, let's just say, independent of the Clintons. So, this may be an avenue to go down here, going right the way back to Glasgow's disappearance, suspicious disappearance, July 28th, 2008, going into this, the fact that the CEO of his firm died early and unexpectedly of a heart attack in 2007.
I don't know if I knew that detail.
Yeah, and the reason that, and it's believed that that is not suspicious. On the other hand, I think the park that's next door to the Clinton Foundation, a former wetland, is named after William Clark, is the Clark of CDI Clark.
The guy who died.
Right.
Wow. I wonder, did they find him lying downhill with the blood running uphill, or is that just...
I don't know about that.
That only happens in Fort Marcy Park.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But the point is, so I wrote these two pieces, then this article comes out, I'm like, that's interesting. And then I write, they say, all right, I better back down. So I wrote this piece, and interestingly, Jason, if we hit the link to this Breitbart piece with so many red flags, let's see how many comments there are. Okay, and maybe it won't come up quickly. Yeah, so
where does it
there's
tell us?
no Facebook. There were at one time many Facebook shares, but look at how many comments there are. 17,000 comments.
That's
right,
good.
and it's unusual. People don't like to take the time to make comments, but this certainly got some attention. Well before the IRS, in theory, started investigating. But 16 March 2015, this was before Clinton Cash, the book comes out. This is way before. Well, it's 2 months before somebody supposedly contacted Comey, a private lawyer, and said, you should investigate this Clinton Foundation.
He's like, who is this? Click. Click.
And, according to Horowitz, the FBI didn't begin investigating the Clinton Foundation until January of 2016, according to...
Isn't that directly contradicted by the documents that we've seen?
Yeah, it's by many different things.
So why would Horowitz say that? How could he not know that?
I don't know. That's why the jury's out on Horowitz.
A lot of people, yeah. I mean, so far he has not been this amazing savior that everybody expected him to be.
Well, and this is Clintonian, because the Inspector General is in charge of investigating the Justice Department is investigating, I believe, current employees of the Justice Department, and there are, there's roads that Inspector General can go down, and there are other roads that the Inspector General cannot go down. And really, this Clinton Foundation, it is a matter for empowered U.S. attorneys in multiple jurisdictions outside Arkansas, I would argue, and outside New York, and also their foreign counterparts. Because if people haven't gotten it yet, that the stench of corruption is so odoriferous, if that's the right word, that it's spreading around the globe. It's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you can smell it. In the Pacific Ocean, you can smell it all the way in Papua New Guinea. It's so bad. If they haven't gotten the message that things are going to change, and perhaps imminently, and that it's not going to be okay for foreign governments to just, pay off, in theory, powerful politicians like the Clintons, in the hopes that some of the money they caused their governments to give to the Clintons will come back into their pockets. This whole thing is not going to just go away.
Yeah.
And we're now, I think, in a zone where people are going to ask, how in the hell did Bill Clinton negotiate a deal, or whoever negotiated, where he would get $17.6 million to be chancellor of a for-profit university for laureate, and no one decided that they better disclose any of that in Clinton Foundation filings, and the links, the laureate principles to the Clinton Foundation, the joint venture between the Clinton Foundation and laureate. Nobody, people say, we don't, those rules, it's Bill, he needs $17.6 million. How's he going to pay for all these people running around the world in private jets? He needs the cash.
As he said, selling pharmaceuticals around the world, 5%.
That's right.
Charles, POTUS 45 is watching us on Periscope right now and reminds us that Al Capone committed fewer crimes than the Clintons.
And in the end, Al Capone was gotten
for
tax evasion, which is exactly, that the strongest, what I believe and what lawyers I've talked to believe, the strongest avenue here is charity tax fraud. It's boy, if the IRS were to stand up and be aggressive on that, if it could be, because a RICO case alleging charity tax fraud, public corruption, etc., brings a lot of firms down, it brings a lot of billionaires down, it then brings the Clintons down, because you're not going to say, all right, I'm Bill Gates, I never really needed that $25 billion that they're going to take away from me. I'm really happy about this. Bill Clinton's my guy. I'll give up $25 billion for him.
Wow.
You're not going to do that.
Is there a difference between charity fraud and charity tax fraud?
Charity, I'm thinking charity/tax fraud. The tax fraud piece of it, charity fraud in my mind is when you run a charity in violation of the law. Personal tax fraud is when you fail to declare the money that went through your non-existent charity as income, personal income. Because the way the cash goes towards the Clintons, and ordinary human beings would say, well, it came in my checking account first, right? And therefore it's income to me. If I turn around, if I get a speech payment of $750,000, I can't just put it in the Clinton Foundation. I put it in my income. Accounts tell me, how much of it I want to give to the Clinton Foundation, and then I may or may not get the deduction that I need to get for putting the money in the Clinton Foundation. You can't just route compensation to me, to my charity, and escape personal income taxation. So I think there's a personal, the most aggressive approach I can think of is to say to the Clintons, you know what, there never was a Clinton Foundation.
So none of it is tax exempt.
None of it's tax exempt, and all of it's personally taxable.
Right.
And then we can debate whether you should or should not have been able to take as deduction. All the revenue of these Clinton entities is personal income to you, Bill Clinton and Hillary.
People are talking about Arkansas as a hub of corruption, and perhaps Walmart and Sam Walton's connections to the OSS through Roy Sturgis are something that should be looked at.
To the OSS?
This person, Michael, is saying, did Charles look into Roy Sturgis, his connection to OSS agent Sam Walton?
I have not, but Sturgis is his foundation. Roy Sturgis and Christine Sturgis were wealthy people who died and have a foundation that in theory routed money to the Clinton School of, in quotes, public service, which I don't believe has been properly authorized as an educational institution. But anyway, I have not, and I will. Thanks for that suggestion.
Sturgis is an unusual name. Frank Sturgis is tightly linked to Watergate and the JFK assassination.
I'll take a look. So the next question, in this element, we have various people. We have Horowitz saying the FBI opened 2 investigations into the Clinton Foundation January 2016. We have others suggesting investigations were opened earlier than that. In 15, still others, in this book I promised to bring by Conchita Sarnoff called Trafficking, which is tough to get, but you can't get it on the shelves of Barnes & Noble, or maybe you can get it on Amazon, but I got it through a place called Shakespeare & Company here in New York, and it took me 10 days or so to get it.
Did they print it on demand, or they?
It may well have been printed on demand.
Yeah, that's a unique feature of that bookstore.
Yeah, and the thing about this book that's interesting is, it has a lot of facts in it. It needs an editor, I think, but it has a lot of good facts in it. And they talk, for example, that Ghislaine Maxwell was served a warrant as the Clinton Global Initiative was meeting in New York in September of 2010. And that's interesting because Barack Obama was at that meeting. And so, there better be some record. If that's true, I don't know if Conchita Sornoff's work is sourced and accurate, but if it's true that there was a warrant, that means there was a grand jury. That means there should be records of this. That means the Clinton Foundation was perhaps under investigation, Clinton Global Initiative, in 2010.
Yeah.
So when exactly did the FBI and IRS refocus on these different charity frauds? Who was sitting on top of that point of those investigations? And then how many different agents were slow-walked by Loretta Lynch, prior to that, Eric Holder? How many different people were told, look, you guys in the FBI, you can investigate this shit all you want, but we're never going to prosecute it in the Justice Department. So, that could well have happened.
They're sensible prosecutors.
Right. And so, where are the records for all that? And then we get Trump is bringing it up, and I think it's a fair point. I'm not somebody who wants regulation of everything, but we see the excesses in life. We see these, getting on the right side of dynastic political families to overpay the Bushes, the Clintons, now the Obamas for film deals and book deals and speech deals and investment deals and all this kind of stuff. And when did these negotiations start? It would be one thing, as in the case of Harry Truman, who I think the lore is that, he finished his work as president, he didn't have a lot of money, he got in a car and drove out to Missouri and went around to his friends and said, I'm still going to need to make money, can you give me a job? And they didn't say, oh, sure, we'll give you a $5 million house, or they wouldn't have it.
Who needs you now?
In Bel Air, but when do the negotiations start for the Clintons, for the Bushes, and now for the Obamas? Were they negotiating for all these fancy deals while he was still president of the United States? And if so, isn't that, epic corruption? That you have, a sitting president of the United States who is leaving office, doesn't have a job, has a small pension, and, how's he going to balance his interests? Sasha and Malia are used to private school, Michelle is used to private jets, and Bill Clinton became used to private, as did Hillary. You're sitting there, it's June of 2016, and you're really concerned about Donald Trump. Are you going to be more interested in stopping Trump if somebody from CBS comes along or some other media conglomerate says, hey, to your agent, if you do this and that and the other thing, we're going to give you $60 million for a book deal. Okay. I mean, that kind of stuff has to be, right?
Yeah.
And if you had, my spy novel collection, right? There are ways of looking it up. I'm in the process of doing that. What are these things worth? Market, the condition of a first edition varies. Price ranges vary. But if you wanted to, be crooked, you could say this book, that maybe is worth only $3,000. Somebody who wants to get on my good side will give me $300,000
right.
for it. And it's not, I would have to report the gain on my income tax.
But they could pay whatever they want for the book.
Well, can they? Should you be able to do that? And with contemporary art, with things where there isn't really a deep market, with a narrow number of dealers, we talk about really small crimes compared to having these things, these political campaigns where the money isn't, these charities that are not, contemporary art market, private equity deals are very tough to value and understand what's really going on. The system is not yet set up. It's years behind where it needs to be to catch these smart but immoral crooks.
Right.
Which brings me to the final question on this time frame. We think about Donald Trump's problems, with the early days of his presidency. Key to the problems, in my mind, is Jeff Sessions.
Really?
Absolutely. Who inserted Sessions into the Trump campaign? Who, suggested to Trump that Sessions would make a good attorney general? Why did Sessions immediately recuse himself? Why was Sessions involved pushing Rod Rosenstein on the American public as Deputy Attorney General, really the guy who ran the Justice Department, who is, for that matter, the Deputy Attorney General, I think, under Barr right now. Are we sure that he is somebody who will be objected? Not
who is it?
It's not, I want to say his last name is Rosen, but not Rosenstein. But I may have that wrong. We can look it up. But these are a bunch of questions that are not conspiracy theory related questions. They're straight up questions. They deserve answers, and I'm going to work on these till I get them. Hopefully, people in the crowd can help, pushing people to get to the bottom of what really happened, to understand the motivations of James Comey and Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein and the Clintons and the Obamas and all these people who have so much to lose should Trump actually win.
Jeffrey Rosen is the guy.
Jeffrey Rosen. Yeah.
So Rosenstein.
Did the Steen
Next,
now?
they're going to have Steen, and then Mr. Steenberg, and then Mr. Rosenberg, Steenberg.
I don't know.
That's not good.
I'm sure. Let's hope this guy's a good person. But anyway, so we finish up on slide 9. There's a good story here. We'll lead off with it. In 2016, this psychologist is alleging that Google, if we hit the blog here, the Powerline blog, 2.6 million votes for Hillary. That Google somehow magically generated at least what's the name of the psychologist?
Do we know the author of this Powerline blog? It sounds familiar to me.
Paul, I don't know him, but look at at the name of the psychologist.
Dr. Robert Epstein. Is
No
that his
relation.
brother?
I don't think so. He's
People are
got a
asking
brother
about it.
named Mark.
Yeah, people are asking about Epstein's brother.
Yeah, Mark is his name. But you know, I believe in watching my own Google search results, which I do on a daily basis. There was a point in time where I was up at 200,000, 225,000, and now it's down around 36, 40,000, and I've done 171 two-hour podcasts. It doesn't make sense to me, given the topics that I cover, the multiple forums where I've appeared, that my results would go down over time as opposed to going up on Google, which suggests to me that, you know, along with the reporting on Google, that the team at Google, you know, the CEO walked into Donald Trump's office and lied to Trump's face.
We did the same thing to Congress, so why are we surprised?
Right. Saying, you know, hey, you know, oh, no, we're doing our best. And then you get all this reporting out of O'Keefe and others, what's really going on in Google. And look, it doesn't surprise me that a young workforce at Google that has suffered the indignity of paying tons of money to go to crap universities with big brands and crap teachers would not surprise me in the slightest that they're deluded. They weren't thought to think objectively about anything. I bring this up because all this fear of, is Russia going to meddle in the new election? Joe Scarborough was saying
Google is meddling in the election.
Of course, but Joe Scarborough was suggesting that Epstein was murdered by the Russians. You know, I had fun going on RT International yesterday, and they brought that up. It's the first time I'd heard it.
He's so stupid.
My response, without being, I'm never given questions in advance, was just instantly to say, they said, Charles, what advice would you have, or what views do you have? And I said, yeah, it's very simple. Joe Scarborough should drink less.
Yeah.
I mean, he's crazy. But anyway, we have the narrative out of Scarborough and among the Democrats that the Scandinavian model really makes sense. You know, that's what Bernie Sanders is advocating. For some reason, you know, when you talk about in America, I guess it's because so many people were driving Saabs up in Vermont.
They went out of business.
I know. They revere the Scandinavian governance model. And just look at this. This is really, I put this link up here for the benefit of Biljana, who early on, Biljana Martinovsky in Sweden, has been trying to warn Donald Trump and others of what's going on in Sweden. And here, this story, which has made Drudge, apparently, I'm surprised it has only 291 shares. Swedish cops are telling women, 4 rapes in 4 days is a lot for a small country. And they're now saying the reaction of the Swedish cops is, don't go out alone.
Yeah, forget about enforcing the law. Just everybody stay home.
Yeah, I mean, and that's absurd.
You know, Charles, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern on Ole Damagard's subscriber exclusive show on patreon.com/Lee Light on Conspiracies and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Ole is going to go to some of these so-called no-go zones in Sweden. He's in Sweden right now, and we're going to have him live on Skype going through there. So people who are sponsors will be able to see that, and we'll see what's going on.
Yeah. So we're almost done. If we go back into the slide, here's somebody. Derek Hunter is a good writer for Town Hall, basically calling Democrat Party the party of fraud.
Yeah.
And I'd go further than that. I would say that it's not just one party. It's Washington, D.C. is the epicenter of globalist fraud, financed from New York and amplified by the buffoons out on the left coast where I was born, in Los Angeles, both in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and then financed by the buffoons in Silicon Valley. It's not a complex thing to get behind this and say, who's profiting from all this? Where do the problems originate? What's the business model for these frauds? The business model is you create something that sounds too good to be true because it's false. And then you go around and you beat the table now using Twitter or Facebook or blast emails or whatever to get money flowing your way. And then you report using the names of accounting firms who don't actually do the work that the money was well spent, don't worry, I'm saving children. It's all connected, and it would be very simple if you had a real highly motivated FBI and IRS, people who wanted to get the job done, collect tax revenue, have that tax revenue go into our treasury, then use the treasury, the money in the cash in the treasury to pay down our debt instead of having going up. It'd be a simple matter to light on, the 100 most obvious American charities that are engaged in fraudulent international activity, to go after the handful of investors who are aggressive, and both in their own tax reporting, but in supporting this fraudulent activity. This is a problem that Donald Trump was elected to fix, and he hasn't fixed it yet, and we're sitting here in August of 2019. It's not a small problem, so we should give him lenience in the amount of time he takes to get the job done. But to be reelected, he's got to get proof that he's serious. He's got to scare the living crap out of the swamp by picking on some cases that are winnable, that have the acceptable, margin of safety, they're within Department of Justice guidelines, picking those cases, and we don't settle for putting Corinne Brown, a 70-year-old African-American congresswoman, in prison for 5 years at the age of 71 or 2, whatever it was, over $1 million, when we've got this Clinton Foundation and the Obama Foundation and other foundations we've talked about out there and unprosecuted. So we also, I failed to mention earlier on this issue of the 302s coming out of Bruce Orr and his wife. There's a lot of good reporting on that in The Hill and elsewhere. How do these senior level people at the FBI tolerate Peter Strzok out there, screwing everything that is nailed down? Supposedly it's a security risk to do that when you're married, and here's the guy who's like in charge of covert investigations.
That's really poor judgment.
It's extremely poor judgment in that role. You would understand it if, I'm not saying I support what Harvey Weinstein did, but you'd understand if some Hollywood movie person was doing that kind of stuff, had nothing to do with national security.
Right.
You might say, well, that's the way that stuff works out there in Hollywood, but we don't approve of it, but we don't live there.
Well, it also doesn't put our safety at risk. Perhaps the next, Miramax movie will not be so good, but who cares?
Right, exactly. But I've put this up before. People who've been longtime viewers will remember that Thomas Jefferson, it's tough to give that guy a hard time for what was going on when he was alive. Yes, he was a slave owner, but he was the author of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, which was, I believe, one of the precursors to the freedom of religion in being in the Bill of Rights. He was the author of the Declaration of Independence. He was the first president of the University of Virginia. That's what's on his tombstone, not that he was governor of Virginia, Vice President of the United States, President of the United States, Foreign Minister. I mean, this guy's record in a relatively short life at a time when there was no electricity, no conveniences, is amazing. And then you read his writings. He wrote this in 1784, I believe, or it was published in 1784, when everyone was excited about having won the Revolutionary War, retaining freedom from the British, but when they were operating not under our Constitution, but under the Articles of Confederation, which did not work, he predicted the shackles which shall not be knocked off at the conclusion of this war will remain on us long, will be made heavier and heavier till our rights shall revive or expire in a convulsion. He predicted that people would, that a single zealot may commence prosecutor. Does that sound familiar to you, like Robert Mueller? And better men be his victims, like, say, Jerry Corsi or other people. This was predicted in 1784, right? And this is, I actually wish that I had majored in history and wish I had taken the chance when I was at Yale to study with the great professors there what really did happen in history. You're not going to make a lot of your life if you ignore history, because it's not like everything we do is new. I mean, people have tried these experiments before, and you can learn from the failures of the past. So Donald Trump is trying to have a convulsion. People say, oh, this is uncomfortable, you know, we want just everything to be as... No, he's putting this country through the required convulsion.
We see it on MSNBC.
Yeah, right. Those are conniptions, not convulsions. But so the point is, we're not going to a place where, you know, nobody gets triggered for any reason. We have inherited too much debt. We've inherited a government that has too many priorities that don't make sense. We have inherited an educational system that is rotten to the core, that's enriching the professors and administrators and not helping the students. We have lots of things that have to be fixed. And, you know, where we are right now on a decision tree, we have the convulsion working, you know, maybe, if we're lucky, but we also face the prospect of somebody like Hillary Clinton or worse winning in 2020 and deciding that, you know, forget freedom. You don't have freedom. I'm going to decide, and the tech barons are going to decide what the correct choices are. You shouldn't be able to make, these are bad choices you're thinking about here. Society will have to pay the price later on when you can't afford health insurance. So we don't want you to have more than 2 glasses of wine. We don't want you to have this food or that food. We're going to pick winners. That's not an America that I want to live in, where, you know, some bonehead or group of boneheads with no experience decides managing your life. You should go to sleep at 11:15. You better wake up, you know, forget that.
Maybe you should be vegan, Charles. You know, somebody wrote me an email predicting that Hillary Clinton would be the vice president for Joe Biden, and then perhaps Joe Biden might go for a hike somewhere in Arkansas, or perhaps take a rest on the ground in Fort Marcy Park.
Exactly. Well, you know, it is actually legal to buy life insurance on other people, and so...
What?
Yeah, you can do that.
Why would that be legal?
It's just, I believe there's...
Well, I guess you become the first person they talk to when that person disappears.
Right. So, in closing, this is a time where I really hope people are frankly with their families and not watching this, and maybe watch it later. But
that's the best advertisement for the show ever. Well, I hope you're not watching.
Well, no, just the point being, it's a beautiful summer August day, and we only get so many of them. And
yeah.
But when you get a chance to watch this, if you like what you've heard, you know, we really would appreciate your forwarding to your friends. This is a moment in time where Donald Trump and his administration need to hear from the American people across the political spectrum that an unequal system of justice is not what the Constitution suggests we should have. We don't want public corruption. I don't particularly like the party system to begin with. I don't see the need for it today. But we have got to get to the bottom of not simply the Epstein schemes, which really were schemes to basically, I think, cheat on your taxes, or the Clinton, Bush, Obama charity scams, or public corruption alone. They're all connected. You know, it's a culture in the swamp where you don't get ahead by inventing a new product or service and selling it to the public. You get ahead by scamming, you know, paying some politician less than the politician should really want to get so that you get a contract that's a lot more valuable to you, or you don't get prosecuted and you escape prosecution. This is the system, business as usual, down in Washington, D.C. And in order for Trump to get reelected with the support that he needs to finish in his second term the disruption process and set this country back on the correct trajectory, we need to see signs of progress, and we need to see them soon.
Yeah.
And the way we get there is if the people who watch the show start circulating it, start circulating more episodes, and start pushing people and encouraging people to do the same thing. We're seeing that in our view count, and we're seeing that in our Twitter feed, and we really appreciate it. But we're at an important point in time, and I hope that we will soon see signs that the people who have been on this case are actually acting for the better interests of we the people.
Yeah. Well, Charles, today was one of our most viewed during the live segment. We've had over 2,000 people watching. So
wow.
Thank you to all of our viewers. And I would think that some are new. I want to remind everyone they can sponsor the show by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And you're going to get access to a lot of exclusive subscriber-only content. As I said, tomorrow morning, Ole is going to be taking us on a tour of these no-go zones in Sweden. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope he's safe. But it also helps keep the show going, and people who come in at $10 per month and higher are going to get the free Sunday with Charles screensaver. We've got one more item here to discuss, Charles, before we close out for today. From the rundown, the question is being posed: was Jeffrey Epstein part of a state-sponsored blackmailing operation? It seems quite obvious that he must have been, given all of these strange deals he was given with not going to jail. I personally don't think it's very plausible to think that Mossad or any foreign intelligence service could run such a lengthy, extensive, and publicly discussed operation without the knowledge of the CIA. And frankly, if it is possible for that to happen, then we need to get rid of the CIA and the FBI and start again from scratch and ask how something like this could have happened. So,
right. Well, as this is a summary of an interview with Ann Coulter, and we've been saying this sort of stuff for quite a while. I mean, I think it's where you can get tripped up in analyzing this is drawing the direct connection to a state sponsor and this operation. It's far more likely, in my opinion, that it's indirect by design. In other words, it wouldn't be Mossad or MI6 or whatever saying, yeah, we'll send a check to Jeffrey Epstein
right.
and arrange for him to meet Prince Andrew and this. It would be a cutout, one or more cutouts. And I also think it's likely that the way this works is that the various hackers and also the state-funded hackers, are on the patrol for this type of incredibly incriminating information. If indeed there are pictures of powerful politicians engaged in sex acts with underage people, or worse than that, snuff films or horrible stuff, if there's stuff like that is on the internet, and the first agency to find out about it, they have the upper hand. How might Mossad use it? How would the CIA use it? Against the UK, etc. I actually think the pitch that I would be using here is that for all of the furor, perhaps rightful furor here in this country that people have vented about Russia meddling in the electoral process in the United States, what if England was actually the one so aggressively meddling, going back to, say, 1988? What if it was England?
People might be more accepting of that because the accent sounds so polite.
Because the food is better. I don't know. No, say, what if it's our friends?
Yeah.
Our acknowledged
That's
friends.
Worse.
What if it's Mossad? What if it's France? What if it's Germany? And it'd be one thing in all those cases if we were, let's say, fundamentally equivalent. If we were, what's the guy's name? Djokovic and Federer, the two tennis players that are, both fantastic. That's not the U.S. and the United Kingdom. I mean, the United Kingdom today is blowing up, right? We have Brexit, we have Scotland talking about wanting independence, we have Wales talking about wanting independence,
wow.
We have an economy that's on the run, it's a fifth the size of the United States. All these, and if we were to find out that a country that we have been subsidizing by the military presences in the UK and Europe to protect narrowly the UK, but our NATO allies, the rebuilding of Europe, and all the things that we've done for the UK, we were to find out that elements in the UK loyal to the Clintons and Obamas and hostile to the notion that America would be a strong nation had been meddling aggressively, not only in national campaigns, but in referenda and other. I think if I were President of the United States, there would be some very tough discussions with the UK, and viably so.
But don't we kind of know that is what happened already?
I don't know that the tough discussion part has happened.
Oh, no, but they did the spying.
Right, exactly.
So that's sort of,
Right.
Okay.
I mean, it wouldn't just be, oh, yeah, well, why don't we get together at our next regularly scheduled meeting? It'd be, get your ass over here. And, I want to know, Boris, that there's a clean sweep at GCHQ and MI6 and any other agency you may have. And most importantly, the DFID, which is a Department of Foreign, it's the equivalent of USAID. It's the UK's arm that doles out these grants around the world and doesn't check where the money's actually going and how much of those grants end back in the pockets of UK politicians. I'd be having some very tough discussions.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that'll happen pretty soon, Charles. There's going to be actually a special show on tonight for everyone. It's not going to be limited to our sponsors, but I had a conversation with a really kind guy who's had a bit of turmoil in his life. People might recognize his father. Earl Schumann was an actor who played numerous roles. I think most people will recognize him right away when they see him. One of the roles that I recognized him from was on Seinfeld. He played the grandfather in that episode.
Oh, I love that.
The English Patient, where he's trying to lift up the TV. So he's obviously funny as an actor, but what happened to him in the end of his life is not funny at all. So his son, Mickey Schumann's going to join me. That'll air at 7 p.m. Eastern, so just after our show here. People can see that on YouTube or Periscope or Facebook, VK.com, the various platforms that we're on, DLive. And people can also visit the new crowdsourcethetruth.com. That's going to give you links to all the social media platforms, sponsorship options, etc. I'm working to increase the capabilities of that website right now, and can't do that without the help of the sponsors. So please get on to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I want to thank everybody and thank you, Charles. People obviously very interested in seeing what will happen next to the allegedly dead Jeffrey Epstein.
Great, Jason.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks everybody for watching.